Test, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay.
Test. Test. Society. I want to thank the Thomas More Society for their support. I'm Mark Serrano with Proactive Communications. Just a reminder, please, to exhibit social distancing, wear your masks as you move about the room. We are coming live to you today as well, live streaming, and we welcome everyone for their time, giving us their time today. You will see through our press release that we are providing our documents, our slides, and the report that we're announcing today at got-freedom.org, got-freedom.org. And we thank you for joining us for this very important announcement as we release a new report about the influence of Mark Zuckerberg's dark money network in the 2020 election. Leading our presentation today will be the director of the Amistad Project, Phil Klein.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. And thank all of you for attending. I appreciate your attendance today and coming out in this, I guess it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, which is kind of wonderful this time of year with the snow coming down. Again, my name is Phil Klein. I'm the director of the Amistad Project. And the 2020 general election witnessed an unprecedented and coordinated public-private partnership in swing states to improperly influence the election for Mr. Biden. This evidence that we're presenting today is present and available to all Americans so that they may see it and assess it, despite the effort of blue state governors and executive officials. The mainstream media has also tried to censor this evidence. Private interests and corporate oligarchs through social media have attempted to prevent the presentation of this evidence. Yet despite all of those efforts to prevent the American public from seeing the truth, America understands that there are serious problems with these elections, and its citizens are demanding that this not happen again, and that this investigation and the influence of private monies in this election through the purchase of local election officials and offices dictating how they manage the elections not ever happen again, and that we come to understand what occurred during this election. The report we are releasing today, entitled The Legitimacy and Effect of Private Funding in Federal and State Election Processes, was commissioned by the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society and completed by Stillwater Technical Solutions, whose principal, James Carlson, is with me on the stage. James is a prolific author and writer, and he additionally has influenced public policy at the national level with the Department of Interior, the Department of Agriculture, the United States Congress, and the White House. His team has been working on investigating the influence of private monies for some time now, and that report will be revealed to you today. The report details the flow of more than $500 million, more than the federal government expended in the CARES Act to fund the election during the COVID crisis, by over $100 million more than the federal appropriation. This effectively is a shadow government running our elections. $500 million into the hands of state and local officials who, in turn, allowed those private organizations and private interests to have access to sensitive and private information of American citizens that was of value to political parties and monetized for interests on the left. It also reveals how private parties, by dangling the dollar bill, incentivize local election officials to violate state law, radically alter election procedures, act contrary to federal law, and violate federal law under the Help America Vote Act. It involved a government in a scheme to turn out a specific demographic of voter. And government engaging in turning out a specific demographic of voter is the opposite side of the same coin as government engaging in an effort to suppress turnout among a specific demographic. Such is not allowed under United States law and is a violation of equal protection and a violation of a prime precept in American law that all citizens need to be treated equally. As a legislator, I often had occasion to speak with groups of individuals who would often give me this refrain: "Why don't you run government like a business?" To which I replied, government's not designed to be a business. It has a much different objective than a business. Government must treat all citizens equally. That means there's inefficiencies in government. It is inefficient in an election to have more than one candidate. You know, we see efficiency in elections in the former Soviet Union when they had one candidate and the elections were run very swiftly and the results were known. That is not the role of government, to discriminate against certain persons and run the election efficient. It is to run it with fairness and transparency and access. And fairness and transparency and access are not the most efficient ways to count votes. It's much easier to let one person go in the room and determine the winner and come out and announce it than to actually allow America in the counting room. And instead, this time we ran government like a business, with $500 million of an oligarch's private monies dictating that America must be kicked out of the counting room, while the billionaire was allowed inside the counting room. This report and the evidence we're going to share today demonstrates that Mr. Zuckerberg's funds flowing through charities paid for the election judges, paid for the satellite offices to turn out the vote, paid for the machines, and dictated the policies that undermine state law. No. The real question we need to ask when we talk about the size of government is whether a specific function is part of government's role, or is it better done in the private sector? That's the real question. What is the scope of government's role? And government has the core responsibility of managing the elections. We don't put out elections for bid. We don't have elections brought to you by Coca-Cola. It is government's job to manage elections, and it must do so without a thumb on the scale and without private interests dictating how those elections are to be implemented. In other words, the question is not efficiency. The question is fairness. And the best antiseptic to a lack of fairness is transparency. Let me restate this because it is fundamental and an important point, or the very purpose of all of our election laws. The best protector of equality and fairness is transparency in the election process. Equality means counting every valid vote, and the flip side of the same coin of equality means not counting every invalid vote. You know, I'm reminded of when the United States first opened up the Oklahoma Territory for settlement. And at the time, a lot of people lined up on what was the border of Kansas, and they shot off a gun, and they allowed them to rush in. That's where we get Oklahoma Sooners, by the way. People cheated, rushed in early, and popped up and said, "I claim this land," the Sooners. But people rushed in, and they formed towns overnight. One of the first towns that was formed had to elect a mayor. So they had people stand in line, 2 lines. If you support this candidate, stand in this line. If you support this candidate, stand in this line. And then they appointed somebody to count as people walked by. And what they learned was some people were sneaking back in the line to be counted twice. And that's when they elected their first sheriff to be able to manage that election. And the point being that with transparency, we can discover fraud. With boarded up windows and election officials kicking one party out, you can't discover fraud. And kicking a party out is a violation of election law. It is a direct violation of election law. And people don't violate the law without a reason. Now we have other means of transparency, and you might remember in our lifetime in the Bush-Gore battles, looking at the hanging chads, debating whether a dimpled chad was an actual vote. That was valid because that election was transparent and America was in the counting room. You didn't get that opportunity in this election. You weren't in there. Mark Zuckerberg was. Again, the truth is that America was kicked out of the counting room and then a billionaire was allowed in. This billionaire, who gave over $500 million that we've been able to track and James has been able to identify in this election, poured most of that money through a charity entitled and named the Center for Tech and Civic Life. I will now call this Zuckerberg's charity because I believe that if you give $350 million to one charity, you have the right to call it after yourself. And as I mentioned, Zuckerberg paid for the election judges. He purchased the drop boxes contrary to state law. He ordered the consolidation of the counting facilities. Zuckerberg paid the local officials who boarded up the windows to the counting room. Zuckerberg money purchased the machines, Dominion and otherwise. And Zuckerberg money was contributed to secretaries of state like Michigan's Jocelyn Benson, who has fought transparency in this election by refusing to release computer logs and trying to bury forensic reports relating to those logs. That is not transparency. That is not the role of a Secretary of State. The Secretary of State's role is not to protect the vendor who manufactures the machines and distributes them. It's to forward the rights of Michiganders to a safe and fair election and a transparent election. Today, with this report and other evidence gathered by the Amistad Project, we're going to tell you this story. It is a story that should have already been told by the mainstream media. And I'm convinced, and if we can move the slide, I'm sorry. There we go. It's a story that should have been told by the mainstream media, and a story I'm convinced would have been told by the mainstream media if the billionaires had a different identity. If it was the Koch brothers, I don't believe that we would have to hold this news conference to reveal this truth. If it was the National Rifle Association putting in $500 million to purchase local election offices and incentivize officials to violate existing state law, we would not have to be holding this news conference. But because the mainstream media has a different agenda than the truth, we have to hold these news conferences and pray and hope that the American people will see past the censorship and the lies. There is no question whether there's evidence that dramatically impacted this election and incentivized people to violate election laws. That evidence has been demonstrated and it has been proven. We are obligated as Americans to share the truth when we uncover that truth. So if you can switch to the slides, please, I'm going to move this forward. As I mentioned, the American public can see through the fog and the smoke screen. Americans don't have confidence in this election. They know something was different. They know that the consolidated counting centers having work stoppages and the sudden flow of hundreds of thousands of ballots into one center, radically altering the result, is not normal. They know intuitively that putting hundreds of thousands of ballots in the drop box and not telling how those ballots got to the counting center breaks the chain of custody of the ballots and calls into question the legitimacy of the ballots. All of this knowledge has resulted in recently, if we can move the slide, this poll was given to us just yesterday. A Newsmax poll that shows that a majority of Americans believe that there was fraud in this election, despite the censorship. If you could move the slide, and you look at 9% are unsure. That means they have questions about the election. If you combine that with those who believe that there was fraud, that's 54% of Americans, contrasted with 45% of Americans. A majority of Americans believe there was fraud in this election. And let me tell you, to call into doubt this election, you don't have to prove fraud. That's a media concoction. You have to prove that election laws were violated. And that has been admitted to by officials. If we can move the slide, please. This is how the mainstream media is reporting this evidence, amid false claims of election fraud. Amid false claims, that is a pretense in the mainstream media before any report regarding the evidence, the admissions, the testimony of witnesses who say that there was fraud, say they participated in fraud, say they were trained to commit fraud, and election officials admitting they violated state election laws. Despite that, if we could go back to the screen, this precedes all reports. Amid false. That is a lie. That is a media lie. And Americans deserve better, and they demand that journalists live up to the proud heritage of their profession. I received a phone call from a reporter from the Wall Street Journal who asked me this question. He said, Mr. Klein, how can you criticize the election process? You shouldn't criticize it. That undermines democracy. I laughed. The lifeblood of democracy is open discourse. The lifeblood of democracy is debate. The proud profession of a journalist is to criticize where government goes wrong. Every citizen in this nation has the right to stand up and proclaim criticism of its government. It is stunning to me that a member of the journalistic profession would say we shouldn't criticize the manner in which government conducted itself. That is stunning to me. Would we have ever uncovered Watergate? Would we have ever revealed the excesses of government in interning Japanese Americans? Would we have ever improved ourselves to the current condition where we recognize that not only men, but women, as well as those with different skin color, have inherent and intrinsic rights to be protected by government without criticism of the government? That is frightening to me, this push towards cultural hegemony that asked us all to shut up because criticizing the process undermines the process. No, not in America, maybe in the former Soviet Union, maybe in totalitarian governments, maybe in those who want to hold on to power at all costs and don't want to reveal the truth. Maybe that criticism is valid from those persons. And what we see today is government managing itself in a way, unfortunately, that punishes criticism. I'll get to a little bit more of that in a little bit. If we can go back to the slides. The media. The media has had a false narrative all through this election to do everything possible to avoid looking at the truth, to avoid it. Let's talk about some evidence. To believe the media's portrayal that there is absolutely no evidence, I have to first explain the concept of evidence. If I showed up, as an investigator, and I oversaw the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and if I showed up at your home and I had a search warrant for documents that I believe revealed that you committed tax fraud, and it was a hot summer day, and I'm outside your home, and suddenly you board up the door, you don't allow us to come in, and I see smoke coming from the chimney, that's evidence. That's a pretty darn good conclusion that you're burning the documents so that the evidence will be destroyed. That is evidence, by the way. To believe what the media has to say, you have to believe that election officials confessing that they intentionally violated state law is not evidence of a problem in the elections. These admissions are found in every state. In Wisconsin, they admitted that they did not require identification on those who were indefinitely confined, and that they did not check if those persons who were indefinitely confined were actually indefinitely confined. Instead, they ordered election officials to accept the claim, contrary to state law. Drop boxes, contrary to state law in Georgia. Mobile ballot pickups without chain of custody, contrary to state law in Pennsylvania. The way that they cured ballots in Pennsylvania was contrary to state law. And courts have found this, by the way. They have found this to be true. Additionally, in Michigan, the manner in which they removed Republicans and the manner in which they cured ballots. And we'll speak about that more, and we'll get express details as it relates to these violations of law. So to believe the mainstream media, you have to believe that a confession is not evidence of what the person confessed to. You also have to believe, if we can go to the next slide, that a box is a human being. You have to believe that a box is a human being. Let me give you an example. I testified before the Wisconsin legislature recently, and I testified after Mr. Knudsen, who's a Wisconsin election official. And he said, I know that the law says that we must deliver absentee ballots to the clerk, but what does that mean? What does clerk mean? Could it mean somebody that the clerk appointed? Or could it even mean a drop box? Now, you have to look to the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is where the law lives and breathes, and the purpose is clear. Delivering an absentee ballot to a person rather than an inanimate object allows the person to verify the legitimacy of the absentee ballot. So a person is not equal to a drop box. That is an admission of a willful and intentional evasion of the law. If I walked into this room and I had a gun, and I don't, by the way, and I pointed it at somebody's head and pulled the trigger, and I said, oops, I didn't know what a gun did, who amongst you would believe that I am innocent of shooting that person? A drop box is not a human being. It's not a clerk. It is an inanimate object without the ability to make sure that that ballot that is cast is one that is valid. To believe the mainstream media in this, and I've pocketed you have to believe the next slide, please. Oh, here it is. You have to believe that the earth is the definition of place. Let me give you an example. Michigan law says that the place of the counting shall have present members of both major political parties. And remember that I said transparency is prophylactic to fraud. If you're not transparent, you can't prove the fraud. And what is happening in Michigan is the law allowed them to take ballots that could not be fed through the scanner because the paper, all military ballots were printed on the wrong paper in Michigan, because somebody might have torn it or they had a coffee stain, and allows what's called election inspectors to look at that ballot and then fill out a new ballot for this person who's not there, cast it and count it. So they're casting votes for people who aren't there. That's why the law very wisely says both parties need to look at it to make sure it's done properly and sign off. And so what Michigan did in Wayne County is they formed a counting room. They consolidated it for the first time ever under Zuckerberg's plans. And they had 134 counting tables in a room the size of 2 football fields. And they said, we complied with the law. A Republican was in the place. He was in the cheap seats, or she was in the cheap seats, and they couldn't even see what was happening at the tables. To believe that's not evidence of fraud, you have to believe that when the legislature passed the law saying a Republican must be in the place, they actually meant any place on the planet Earth. Clearly, that's not the purpose of the law. Clearly, that is an intentional violation of the law. Oops. But it gets worse. Michigan is under siege. Michigan executive officials are now using the power of government to threaten those with whom they disagree with. Bringing this evidence forward not only gets you the mockery by the mainstream media, who refuses to report it, it now gets ethics complaints filed against you if you're a lawyer, where you have the Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Michigan, tweeting that those who bring these lawsuits need to be investigated ethically. Now, we've talked about the importance of a public discourse in a democracy. That doesn't allow public discourse. That is a chilling of public discourse. That is asking lawyers to put their fear above representing their clients in legitimate litigation. That is wrong. And I'm stunned that the Bar Association and other organizations of professionals in the legal community have not condemned this type of activity by the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Michigan. But it gets worse. The Michigan Attorney General threatened legislators with whom she disagreed with criminal prosecution. She tweeted it out and gave an interview that those legislators who might not agree with certifying the election could be investigated criminally by the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Michigan. Folks, that's totalitarianism. That is thuggery. It is stunning that America hasn't risen up with a uniform voice and state that when the state threatens people who are elected to be the voice of the people with criminal prosecution, if they speak on the people's behalf, should be arrested. That's not the United States of America. Michigan is under siege. And it gets worse. In Michigan, the electors met on December 14th at the Capitol building as required by law. The governor and others said that COVID restrictions prevented people from being present, but it's interesting how COVID only blocked Republicans from entering the Capitol on that day. Democrats entered. They selected their electors on the Senate floor. Republicans were barred at the door. But if you believe that COVID was the reason, let me show you that it really wasn't, because, again, this is an admission. Governor Whitmer later said it wasn't COVID. If we can go to the next slide. She claimed, nope, back one. It was a security threat. She first claimed COVID, but then later it was a security threat. And she gave an interview to NPR on that security threat. Interesting, what security threat would allow Democrats in the building and Republicans not to go in the building? I'm uncertain. But this is what happened. That is Ian Northon, an attorney in Michigan. He's surrounded by Republican legislators and electors who are being blocked by one of the 200 police officers that Governor of Michigan, Governor Whitmer, mobilized to prevent them from coming in that building. The People's House was shuttered. It was closed. Governors don't dissolve parliaments or legislatures. Kings and queens do. That's not America. That's not the process. But later we learned, and we thank the Michigan police by revealing this truth. Afterwards, they say they're not aware of any threat that was given, that there was no credible threat. There was no basis for COVID. This was just a power grab that used the force of the state and the police power of the state to prevent Republicans from gathering on a day where they have the constitutional duty to review the election and to certify it, so that only a select group of people were allowed in those hallowed halls. Folks, that chamber is not Governor Whitmer's chamber. It is the people's chamber. and that capital should be open to the people of the state of Michigan. This is frightening, and I hope people start to wake up to this. We got involved in the Amistad Project almost 2 years ago, concerns with election integrity, originally as it relates to the digital vulnerabilities of our elections. And we'll speak briefly about that a little bit later. But we started to see things change as we moved into the COVID concerns in the spring of 2020. And we saw governors starting to proclaim themselves to be not a part of the lawmaking process, but to be the law. And they said that they were exercising these emergency police powers for our benefit. Now, these powers, which are extraordinary, are only to be exercised at a time when democracy cannot function, when the legislature is in a bunker, or they're hiding, or they've been decimated by foreign attack. When democracy can function, we don't have a constitution that supports governors saying, I do not have faith in democracy. I'm not going to propose bills. I'm not going to have a public hearing. I'm not going to have debates about whether this is good for America. I'm going to dictate it. And what I believe that we're missing is that these dictates cover every aspect of human life. They cover whether you can be 5'11" away from a person or 6'1". They cover whether you can attend a funeral, whether you can attend a wedding, whether you can have friends over for the holidays, whether you can visit a loved one who is dying. And when you pass laws that impact every aspect of human life, those laws are unenforceable. There's no police force large enough to enforce those laws. So what happens? They're only enforced against those who raise their voice against the government. And that's what you see happening in America today. Health or workout areas where somebody says the government's wrong, suddenly they get raided. A barber in Michigan who says, wait a minute, I disagree with this, they get raided. You see government not only playing favorites in elections, playing favorites in who has economic vitality and whose business is going to be crushed. Big box stores are open, while church facilities of the same size cannot open. You have arbitrary enforcement. We got involved because Governor Whitmer herself threatened a group of black urban pastors with jail if they met to speak against cancel culture. We represented that group called One Nation. She continued to threaten them with jail if they met or if they marched, while she marched with Black Lives Matters. We see this example all across the nation, and it violates a basic tenet of American law that all citizens have value and all citizens are to be treated equally, and all voices have value in the American debate. We're trending the wrong direction out of fear. Fear has allowed them cover to become petty tyrants within their state. As we move through that process, we started to see the impact on elections as emergency orders started to change the election process. This is the report prepared by Stillwater. And it shows the flow of private monies on the top tier from leftist organizations through 8 private 501c3s, as well as 2 quasi-public private entities, demonstrating how they became the shadow government that managed the elections in the urban core. It was Mr. Zuckerberg and his money, the Democracy Fund, the Tides Foundation and the 1630 Fund, Arabella Investors and the New Venture Fund, Skoll Foundation, Mr. Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan and the Knight Foundation that we've discovered thus far that flowed these monies in for this purpose. These monies dictated everything from how to run the election to actually designing the ballot, designing the software for the poll books, encryption services for government. There's been a lot of discussion of hacking into our system. We were not hacked from without. We were hacked from within. ERIC, which is one of these organizations on the far left of the chart. They are an organization with various members that's a quasi-public private entity that does our cybersecurity standards for elections. Next to that is the CSMR, the Center for Secure and Modern Elections. CSME, I'm sorry. They are working to get easy registration changes at the United States Post Office so that when you change your address, you are automatically changed in registration. But has anybody checked how easy it is to fill out a change of address form at the United States Post Office? It undermines the integrity and the verification of the identity of the person who is registering to vote. CEIR, the Center for Election Innovation and Research. The Center for Election Innovation and Research received $50 million that we know of from Mark Zuckerberg. They authored the Pennsylvania voter registration system called SURE. And we have identified that alterations of that system occurred after the election, during a time when election challenges were being forwarded. The books were being cleaned up. $50 million to CEIR. They have, as you see on the sheet, they have access to driver's license information and are promoting an interface and sharing of driver's license information. They've teamed up with Democracy Works, who we believe, we haven't confirmed yet, has a contract with the United States Postal Service for complaints as it relates to the failure to receive ballots. That complaint information is valuable political information, and it's being shared with a select group of outsiders who then can share that information politically. The Center for Tech and Civic Life. This is what we're going to drill down on today. The Center for Tech and Civic Life. You will see the name Tiana Epps Johnson. She is all through this. Tiana Epps Johnson is also a member or has been a member of some of these other groups and heads up the Center for Tech and Civic Life. National Vote at Home Institute. You will see Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State of Michigan, is a part of the National Vote at Home Institute. They support vote by mail and home voting, which requires each individual voter to have the technology to print their own ballots. Imagine the lack of the chain of custody in printing your own ballots. And sharing this technology with the private sector is concerning in and of itself, because sharing the technology allows for the printing of ballots. The United States Vote Foundation, you've got the same funding, and they are seeking state directories and mailing lists, which can be privatized and used. Pennsylvania Voice partners with Rock the Vote and online voter registration, access to the SURE system. You have to understand, voter registration in the past was always done by the county clerk for three primary reasons. The county clerk had three checks against the county clerk's conduct. One, they were elected, and if they failed, they could be removed. Secondly, they had a geographic definition for what they were doing, which was easy to audit. Thirdly, they have accountability to you, the media, because they have to respond to FOIA requests and open record requests to keep them accountable. Rock the Vote does not. These private groups do not have to share anything with you on how they're managing registration. They are not held accountable politically in any fashion. You can't vote them out. And there is really no way to effectively audit their entries into the voter rolls. So we created a fundamental portal that is a flaw on the front end of voter registration in our nation. I'm not saying Rock the Vote did anything nefarious, but when you have all these volunteers for this organization, none of them approved directly by government to be able to do this, you invite fraud. We can go to the next slide. Let's talk about CTCL. This is their top 21 grants. Again, that we've been able to discover because they're not an open organization. It reflects $81 million granted, every one of them to a city that Hillary Clinton or a county that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. $81 million. Let's move to the next slide, please. About March of 2020, we started to see a couple of things that were concerning regarding the election. One was a score of friendly lawsuits. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The left initiated dozens, scores of friendly lawsuits to change the way the election was done. What I mean by a friendly lawsuit is when you sue an official knowing that they're going to agree with you, so that they don't put up a defense to your claim and actually settle it and give you all that you're asking for. I'll give you an example in Virginia where the League of Women Voters filed suit saying that the witness requirement for absentee ballots under COVID was unconstitutional because it put people's health in jeopardy. That suit was filed against the Commonwealth of Virginia, where the Attorney General of Virginia, a role I had in Kansas, was tasked with defending the suit. In the first paragraph of that lawsuit, the League of Women Voters actually quoted the Attorney General of Virginia saying that the witness requirement is probably a violation of the Constitution because it's unsafe in COVID. Within 1 week, he capitulated in defending the Commonwealth and agreed to a settlement that eliminated the witness requirement on absentee ballots. Those suits were filed across the nation, challenging not only the witness requirement, but deadlines of counting absentee ballots, the requirement of a postmark, the requirement that the ballots be given to a clerk. All of the protections of the absentee ballots were challenged by the left in litigation, claiming that COVID prevented them from being carried out. That happened in March. For the Attorney General of Michigan to say that those who disagree with her should be investigated criminally, where was she in March when those on the left were undermining state law? That was passed by the legislature. Now, I don't believe any of them should be criminally investigated, but certainly it should have been spoken of that these lawsuits were to undermine protection for the integrity of the absentee ballot. Why do we have those protections? Because the absentee ballot is cast away from the polling place. When you vote in person, there are persons trained to measure whether you're being intimidated, whether you understand, whether you're being coerced or being misled. Away from the polling place, none of those protections are present. That's why President Jimmy Carter and James Baker said that most fraud occurs with the absentee or mail-in ballots, and we need to protect that. And that is why most all states have some protections like signature requirements to compare signatures, applications for absentee ballots, requirements of witnesses for absentee ballots. All of those were eviscerated in this election, either through friendly litigation or through Mark Zuckerberg's monies and the dictates of what they would do. David Plouffe, March 2020, Mr. Plouffe wrote a citizen's guide for defeating Donald Trump. And on page 81 of that book, he said that it's going to come down to a block-by-block street fight in the urban core to turn out the vote if you're going to defeat Donald Trump. At the time, he was working for Mark Zuckerberg. He's Obama's former campaign manager. Not long afterwards, we started to see CTCL, which has averaged about 1.2 million a year, suddenly reaching out to create grants. And they started calling Democrats. The Democrat mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, was contacted. And they said, look, we're going to give you, it was $100,000 total. But you're going to turn around and you're going to recruit Green Bay, Kenosha, Madison, and Milwaukee. Give them $10,000 each so that the five of you can come up with a plan, and we got more money coming. So this small group gave out about 8% of its annual revenues to one city, and they knew more was coming because they were granting monies to recruit other cities, and they told them which cities to recruit. And with that, these 5 cities came up with, and that's pretty remarkable, the Wisconsin Safe State Voting Plan. Now, you have to understand that federal law requires every state to come up with their own voting plan. They have to submit that plan to the federal government. In return, they receive federal dollars. They cannot change that plan unless they have public hearings. That plan requires that they treat every voter equally and disperses the funds in that fashion. Here, 5 cities claim to have their own Wisconsin safe voting plan, and this was developed with Mr. Zuckerberg's money. In that safe voting plan by these 5 cities, which they claimed for the whole state, they said they wanted to, and all of the effort is really to turn out the vote in these Democrat cities. It's not safety, it's turning out the vote. Encourage and increase absentee ballot, provide assistance to those filling out the ballots. They actually hired witnesses for the ballots because the absentee ballot required witnesses. How do you witness a ballot being filled out by a person whom you do not know? We generally require notaries to do that, not hired witnesses by Democrat officials. Deploy additional staff and technology improvements, and that was all paid for by Zuckerberg, and expand in-person curbside voting. I want to take a moment and have James step up here. I'm sorry, James, wait a second. I think it's a little bit later. Here are the grant numbers. Well, no, come on up here. That's in Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan, James. Tell them about these grant numbers. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press, American people. My name is James Carlson. I have the privilege to serve the Amistad Project and the American people. This slide right here in front of you is the Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan of 2020. And going from the vertical axis to your left, you'll see encourage and increase absentee voting by mail. So those are actually directives. Dramatically expand strategic and voting education, launch poll worker recruitment, training and safety, and ensure safe and efficient election day and administration. What you have here is a plan that was developed by the 4 cities in Wisconsin to submit to CTCL in exchange for grant contracts. And so that's what's in front of you here. And there are cities, it's actually 5, Green Bay, Kenosha, Madison, Milwaukee, and Racine. And so working across, you begin to see the amount of dollars that have been allocated to these cities. Now, to give a little context to this, Phil mentioned the HAVA plan, the Help America Vote plan. And so I'll back out just a little bit and describe that for you so that we can understand that. The Congress appropriates money to the Elections Administration Commission, EAC, who in turn disseminates that money to the various states under what are called state implementation plans. Those are HAVA implementation plans. They're adopted by the various legislatures, and then the commissions, the various commissions from each of the individual states. Those commissions now are responsible for administration of elections throughout the various states. And so that's how the system works. Here we have private money that was injected at the last minute by private entities. Now it's important. One of the basic questions, it's a basic civics question that I think we should ask here. And that is it legitimate to allocate private money for public elections? Very, very basic question. Can you legitimately allocate and inject private money into public elections? So that's what we have here in front of us in the Safe Voting Plan, Phil, of Wisconsin.
And James is going to come up in a minute and explain to you how these cities already had adequate funding from the federal government to implement these plans. And I want you to notice, though, how much money is allocated towards voter turnout. This money is going to a Democrat stronghold to provide voter turnout, while at the same time they primarily claim this money was necessary because of COVID. Voting absentee, this is from the Safe Election Plan by these 5 cities in CTCL. You'll see that they see that state law, or they claim state law is an impediment. Voting absentee by mail has been complicated by the imposition of state law requiring voters to provide voter ID. So in other words, they are planning on ways to circumvent or undermine that law passed by the state legislature. That's not the role of the cities. They should not be doing that. Here is Philadelphia, and we obtained these documents pursuant to court order in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. We sued over this, and our lawsuits are still proceeding. They're not going to be done anytime soon to affect the current election. They're going to take months and years to litigate. But we have sued CTCL regarding this because, as James mentioned, we believe it's pretty clear that privatization and incentivization of election offices is not lawful. Now, I'm not saying that's a crime. That's a different thing. I'm saying it's not lawful under our laws relating to election integrity and the manner in which elections will be conducted. They dictate to the city of Philadelphia that you'll have 800 or more in-person polling places on election day. That's a requirement for the grant. And here you have the city and commissioners will have secure drop boxes. It requires and dictates drop boxes to be available. And drop boxes, again, require a chain of custody that was not provided in Philadelphia or Allegheny County or Pittsburgh or any of those areas. Satellite election centers. This is significant in Philadelphia because that was a specific term that CTCL dictated that they have. Not satellite polling places, satellite election offices. Now, these satellite election offices actually received ballots. They acted as a polling place, but the city argued with Zuckerberg funds that because they were called satellite, no Republican needed to be present. Because the law required members of both parties to be present in polling places. And even though these performed the same function, they were not called polling places. They were called satellite offices. Again, transparency is lost. This is CTCL's math and how they involved themselves in Virginia. And a couple of things about it. When we started criticizing them, their response was, we gave to more Trump counties in Virginia than we gave to Clinton. Well, that is technically true. They gave to 13 Trump counties that he won in 2016 a small amount of money. They gave to 8 Clinton counties large amounts of money. Hillary Clinton only won 8 counties in Pennsylvania in 2016. They gave 100%. They gave to all of the Clinton counties. They gave to 13% of the Trump counties. And they gave millions, early money, planned money to the Clinton counties. Late, small amounts after receiving criticism to the Trump counties. Here's how it played out. I'll take you to Delaware County, Pennsylvania, 1 drop box for every 4 square miles. That's 2 miles by 2 miles square. That's you could walk out the door and stroll and vote. Plus they had mobile pickup units. And they had 800 satellite offices in Philadelphia. In the 59 counties that Trump won, 1 drop box for every 1,159 square miles. At the same time, Governor Wolf was shutting down in-person polling places. All of you know that Republicans prefer to vote in person on election day and Democrats prefer to vote in advance. They were making it easier to vote in Democrat strongholds, harder to vote in Republican strongholds. In Democrat strongholds, go for a stroll or wait for somebody to pick up your ballot. In Republican areas, go on a weekend vacation and engage in a Where's Waldo hunt for a drop box. That's wrong. That's government putting its thumb on the scale. And then there's this, a clawback agreement in every contract that CTCL did with Mark Zuckerberg money that says if you do not follow our plan, we're going to take back our money. All of it. You have to do what we say. And James, if you could step up and explain to them how that undermines the financial integrity of these cities that receive the monies.
The word, think of it this way, the word clawback implies a visual, claw back. And so we found the clawback provisions in the CTCL contracts that were executed with local governments, local electoral officials, And these contracts, the CTLC contracts with clawback provisions, had within them specific language that said you must spend, the electoral officials must spend the money on specific things, drop boxes, satellite votings. There was a whole host of things that were stipulations in the clawback agreements. And so what we have here is a private agency giving money to a local elected official and entering into a contract requiring these local precincts and electoral officials to do specific things. There again, you have blending of private and public entities. That's the issue. And so in terms of the clawback, they had stipulations for absentee ballots and drop box locations, like I said, and plans and maps. But there was something else that we saw in our report, and I really encourage you to obtain and read the report, and that is that the contracts over time, the contract to Philadelphia, which was $10 million, there was a $10 million grant that was given to the city of Philadelphia for executing safe and secure elections. What we saw over time is the language in the Philadelphia CTLC contract, and there's a link to that contract in the report, is we saw over time that those contracts became more and more vague. The clawback provisions were still there, but they became more vague. They became more opaque after the lawsuits came out and after some public light and public scrutiny began to fall on CTCL. So we saw that. So that's one problem. The second thing is, and this is probably for local governments something that if you are the recipient, a local government that was recipient of CTCL funding, that you should consider, is that the clawback provisions actually could impose a future liability on your county that could impact your bonding. That CTCL, if they came and required that money back, it's conceivable that your county could face a future liability for the money if CTCL asked for that money back and chose to exercise that clawback provision.
Thank you, James. And these grant requests generally require a report by the end of the year by the cities, and it gives CTCL the sole discretion as to whether to demand the return of the funds. This is the Philly grant agreement that we obtained pursuant to court order and the plan identified by Philadelphia. And you see right there that in each satellite office, they're going to have these persons, judge of elections, 2 inspectors, 1 clerk, and 1 machine inspector. By the way, again, the machines were purchased by Zuckerberg money. And just a brief comment about the machines. You can't see inside a box. You know, we used to have elections where you dropped your ballot in a box, and to count them, you had to open the box. Well, the way you open the box of a computer is to get access to the computer logs. Every forensic computer person will tell you that. You have to have access to the logs. And guess what? The Secretary of State of Michigan and others are trying to prevent America to have access to the logs. They're not letting you see inside the machines. The very machines that count America's votes, they don't want you to see inside. It's like saying, we get to look inside the box, but you don't. That's not right. Who accepts that as a transparent election? Why don't we ask the next question? Why can't we see inside the box? Just recently, there was a forensic report relating to Dominion machines out of Antrim County, Michigan. That report was very, very critical of the functioning of the machines. It identified several flaws in how they managed the election, such that the election would not be certified under federal law. Guess who fought the release of that forensic report? The Secretary of State of Michigan. Why? Why will they not allow us to see inside the box purchased by Mark Zuckerberg? It's a pretty fundamental question. And I hope some of you ask it soon. But here they're paying the election judges. They're paying the election inspectors. They're paying the people, Zuckerberg money is paying the people that determine what ballots to count and how they're going to be counted, and the machines that tabulate them. CTCL has tried to engage in a PR campaign to respond to this. This is from their own site. And this is how they say that they allocated the monies. You'll see drop boxes and drive-through voting. Look at the staffing. Most of it has been to pay election officials or additional absentee ballot supplies and training and encouragement for voters to engage in absentee ballots and voter education. Safety is one of the last and least funded concerns. There's something else as it relates to that that's important to recognize. Zuckerberg money also consolidated the counting centers. So what used to be a small room based on a ward became a football-sized complex facility based on a city. They claimed they needed to do that for COVID. But what it really did, and it doesn't make much sense, by the way, to create a crowd for COVID, what it did do is allow them to put Republicans on the outside so they couldn't see what was happening on the inside. And it additionally allowed for hundreds of thousands of ballots to be brought to one location. How did they do that? We just know that a week or two ago, we had Jesse Morgan on this stage, a truck driver out of Pennsylvania, who testified on an affidavit that he picked up a load of completed ballots in Bethpage, New York, drove them across the state line of New York to New Jersey to Pennsylvania, and when he finally delivered them, all kinds of things didn't go normally. And then his trailer disappeared with 250,000 completed ballots from Bethpage. We corroborated his story by speaking with an expediter, a dock worker in Bethpage, New York, who stated that she saw this happen on multiple occasions. Ballots being loaded on trucks from a facility that doesn't even receive mail to process it. It only deals with bulk packaging. We have turned over that information to the Postal Service Office of Inspector General. And to date, the only investigation I'm aware of that they've done is to try to question Jesse's mother during a week when she was burying her own mother who died from stroke, and speaking to Jesse's ex-wife. American institutions are failing. Faith in our institutions is at an all-time low. It appears that people are not doing their job. And I would hope that you and the media would help us make sure that these persons and institutions do their job. James, if you could step up here and explain how these cities had sufficient funding and didn't need the CTCL money.
Our first question was, is it legitimate to have it allow private money into public elections? So that was our first question. Our second question, and this is woven through the report, these are the questions that we address. Our second question was public funding adequate to administer the 2020 general elections and indeed the elections process in its entirety? So the chart you have before you is a comparison of government funding and CTCL grant funding. So here's a comparison from the report, and it's on page 9. And basically what this slide tells you is you have Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin on the x-axis there on the left, and 2020 HAVA plus CARES funding. Now, it's important to understand that you had HAVA funding that is part of the electoral process and appropriated by the Congress through the EAC and then to the individual state individual state commissions. And then you had CARES funding, which was appropriated to respond directly to the coronavirus itself and the recovery. And so you had, and also electoral purposes. And so you had the combination of those two, and I had two other slides as well. the combination of that funding in Michigan, well, you just use that as an example, and we can just use that as an example. But the combination of funding for HAVA and CARES funding was $28 million and about $28,023 and some change. And so you go over to the next slide, and the CTCL. Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, so you go over to the next column, and you have the CTCL grants, and those that were awarded into Michigan. Okay, so these are actual grant monies that were awarded to various cities throughout Michigan and accepted and received by local officials. And that's really, really important as well. We had local electoral officials who were opting and choosing to take CTCL money, private money, in lieu of available federal funding. Okay, so that's an important point. And so in the case of Michigan, they accepted $6,369,753. So, and these are all facts that came from the EAC's website, and there's links on the hyperlinks on the report that go right to the government report.
I'm sorry, James. Let me know what the EAC is.
Oh, the EAC is the Elections Administration Commission. Elections Assistance Commission. Yeah. And so the take-home message from this slide for Michigan is that the CTCL grants that were awarded into Michigan comprised about 22% of the funding available. Now, one of the things I'll tell you ahead of time, and then I'll demonstrate it through the charts, is that you actually had CTCL and private funding that supplanted available government funding. So there was plenty of government funding available absent any private funding whatsoever. And that's counter to the CTCL narrative. You'll see that they came out very early on and said we need to fund elections, we need to fund electoral processes, we've got COVID, we've got all these things going on, and so we want to be we want through our 501c3 charity donate money through local electoral officials or give money to local electoral officials. But yet there was plenty of funding available. So next slide, please. Okay, here in this one, we have HAVA and CARES funding plus state matching funds. So again, we'll just stay with Michigan. In 2019, the HAVA carryover. So in Michigan, that's the state we're talking about. In Michigan, you have $6.6 million carryover from 2019 into 2020. So that was unspent HAVA funds that rolled over into 2020. And then the Michigan secretary, who is the officer in charge of HAVA, that's Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, received another $12 million. And then there's a state match requirement. And then CARES funding. And so the total here into Michigan available for administration of elections throughout the 2020 general election cycle was $34,689,000 and some change. So that's the number that's the money that's available for administration of elections, 2020 elections and electoral processes in Michigan. Plenty of money available. Next slide, please. Okay, and so here, this one is the actual expenditures. So we had money that was allocated, federal money that was allocated through HAVA and CARES. And this slide actually demonstrates the expenditures. And so the amount appropriated from our previous slide was $11.3 million. The state match was 2.2, and the initial total available for administration was about $13.5 million. Now, what's important about this is that you had the expenditure. The state of Michigan only spent $6.8 million of the available public funds, which is about 49%. And instead, what you had, these are EAC charts from the federal government. There's hyperlinks in the report. But and by the way, when we talk about the report, that we're authors, always kind of promote their own work. So sorry if I'll stop saying that too much. But here, the available funds, here's the take-home message from this slide. This is really, really important, is only 50% of the monies were spent as of September of 2020, and instead you had the Secretary Benson and the electoral officials coming out and promoting private funding for public elections. That's a very, very important, in lieu of public funds, public funds that were available.
Thank you, James. And in anticipation of the question, I want to move back, and you see the $34,689,000 from Michigan there, but that includes other funding in addition to CARES, which was passed in March 2020. You go here, and James is only mentioning the CARES funding, and there you see that 11 million again, 299. So just out of the CARES appropriation, Michigan still had $6.7 million available to it for the 2020 election, or 49% of its funding, when it accepted a CTCL grant. So absolutely demonstrates there was not a need for this private funding at this time, and that all of these cities should have been treated equally with the other cities in the state of Michigan as it relates to the management of the election. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm the one controlling it. Going through and identifying the violations of state law by state. And it's important to note that these violations occurred everywhere there was Mark Zuckerberg money. Everywhere there was Zuckerberg money. Arizona. They failed to comply as it relates to the chain of custody on drop boxes. And additionally, they allowed people to vote at addresses where they were no longer residing because of the drop boxes. Georgia, you have several examples of how they violated state law. I would encourage all of you to look at articles recently published in Georgia regarding drop boxes, and additionally, Georgia responses to drop boxes by Michael Patrick Leahy, who is a journalist who's been demanding this chain of custody logs that he's not getting forthcoming as it relates to Georgia law and the drop boxes. These chain of custody are required by election laws, and they're not being provided. Who picked them up? When? How long did it take them to deliver them? Did they have 2 persons per key? Those types of answers are not being provided. Wisconsin violated several aspects of law, and I mentioned some of them. One was the clerk who said, or the elections official, Mr. Knudsen, he said, I don't understand the definition of the word clerk. It could mean a box. Where the law in Wisconsin is very clear. You must deliver ballots directly to the election clerk. And there's other examples as it relates to those who are indefinitely confined do not need to show voter ID. The Wisconsin Supreme Court actually chastised election officials on 2 occasions, saying that you must follow the law, that these persons have to be actually indefinitely confined before you excuse them from the voter ID requirement. In Michigan, there were problems with curing the ballots. In that they excluded people from watching the curing process. They excluded people from being able to watch the management of the ballots. And again, breaking the chain of custody as it relates to drop boxes. I believe the story in Georgia, by the way, indicates that there are over 500,000 ballots cast through drop boxes in which there's no chain of custody provided. Pennsylvania, I'll describe this briefly, but there's much more, and you can get this afterwards. In Pennsylvania, the Democrat areas that had Zuckerberg money decided to cure ballots contrary to state election law. Election law says that if the absentee ballot is not completed in a proper fashion, that it is not to be counted. But Democrat officials in these strongholds took these ballots, set them out in the hallway, and asked party officials to come pick them up and fix them, fix other people's ballots, which they did. In Republican strongholds, that was not done because, one, they believed it was against the law, but secondly, they didn't have the resources because they didn't have the Zuckerberg money to hire people to manage that process. So again, in Democrat strongholds that went 85 to 90% for Mr. Biden, you had people fixing ballots. In Republican strongholds that went predominantly for Mr. Trump, there was no fixing of the ballots. That again is a violation of equal protection. That's just one example in Michigan. This report, I would encourage you to read it. As Mr. Carlson stated, it has hyperlinks to all the sources of information. It does constitute evidence of lawlessness in this election. And I would just simply say this. This is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's an American issue. When the leading democracy in the world cannot conduct its elections in a transparent and fair manner, that is a threat to democratic republics around the world. There are serious, serious questions that must be asked. We must persist to get the answers to those questions, regardless of the objections of state officials who don't want us looking inside the box. There has been this false rush to declare who won the presidency that is not required by our Constitution. Our Constitution contemplates election disputes. It allows certain challenges and time to be able to determine whether the election was conducted lawfully and fairly and has an accurate result. These deadlines that we keep talking about of the Electoral College are done and passed through Congress statute. They can't override the Constitution. Moreover, primarily they were done out of convenience. They were last amended in 1945. If you go back far enough, the election date was determined based upon when the harvest would come in, and the meeting of the Electoral College was based on how long it took to ride a horse to Washington, D.C. Why in the world should we allow those deadlines to prevent a full-scale understanding of this election? Moreover, there is another challenge to American democracy right now. And that is, under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution, legislatures are given the primary responsibility in determining the electors. That means they have the responsibility of reviewing the election to make sure that it was lawful and also fair, and exhibit a result in which we can have faith. But now, they're not even allowed to meet. Since Election Day, legislatures around this country are prohibited from meeting. They can't even meet to review the election or debate it. The institution that has the primary constitutional responsibility is prohibited from even meeting. In some states, it requires the governor to call them into session, and the governor refuses. So in other words, a small group of people can prevent those elected by the people from actually meeting and having a full-scale discussion in both House and Senate about the legitimacy of the election. That's not democratic. Shuttering the doors of the people's house is not democratic. Only allowing one party in the state capital of Michigan is not democratic. Only allowing one party, wherever Mr. Zuckerberg's money's touched, to be able to handle and watch the counting of the ballots is against election law. And it's the obligation of every American to make sure this does not happen again and to ensure that we get at the facts and the truth about this election. And I would invite you to join us in that effort, because we're not going to stop until we do. Thank you. Will you please respond to your questions? Questions? Yeah. And if you're comfortable doing that, or I could repeat it. Okay.
So you pointed out that the government-provided public funds were displaced by this private money. So they didn't even use what they had provided by the government and chose the private money. Is that because they have less regulation in using this private money?
Well, I would say this, a couple of things regarding that. First of all, as James mentioned and we mentioned earlier, there is a state plan. The legislature has the responsibility. So they pass a state plan that treats every voter equally. And those funds have to be used consistent with equal protection and consistent with that state plan. For example, in Wisconsin, before the Zuckerberg money, generally each jurisdiction received $4 to $7 a voter to manage the election. You know, there's some offsets because of additional costs depending on where you're located. But that has to be followed by the city. The Zuckerberg money? No. That is a direct agreement with a private entity. And for example, the receipt of these 5 cities of these funds gave them up to $47 a voter to manage the election, as contrasted with the $4 to $7 that the state gave. What Mr. Carlson's point was, is that there was available additional money for them to do this funding and manage the election consistent with federal and state law. But they got private money. And that private money was spent in a way that it created a 2-tier election system and also helped them evade state law as it relates to voter ID requirements, absentee ballots, and so forth.
So technically, this is legal for them to do?
No, we don't believe it is. Not at all. Here's their response. Nothing in the law prohibits it. But there are things that prohibit it. First of all, the states are required to follow the plan they submit under federal law. They can't deviate from it unless they have a public hearing, and you all have a right to ask questions about it. Second, federal law prohibits a disparate treatment of voters based on demographics. Thirdly, and this is kind of it's a long-standing rule of law, but cities are creatures of the state. The state holds the power, not the cities. And the cities can't step out of what the state requires unless they have express authority to do so. So it's not that the law doesn't prohibit it. It's that the law doesn't allow it. And therefore, it's contrary to state and federal law.
Then does Congress need to do a law that specifically prohibits?
No.
Okay.
No. It's kind of like the debate about a place in Michigan. You know, do we need a new law that says that at the counting facility, there must be a representative of both political parties in the place of the counting? Well, you would not think that we would need that unless people tortured what the definition of place is by replacing the purpose of the law to allow people to see with the strained definition that place means the planet Earth. And since there's a Republican on the planet Earth, we've complied with the law. We did not have to do that in America until we deconstructed truth and deconstructed the meaning of words to the point that words don't mean anything. So therefore we can shape them for whatever purpose we want and use them as a tool to get what we want. I would hope we're not completely at that place, that Americans still retain some common sense, understand what the purpose of the law is, and effectuate the purpose of the law. If we lose that, we're speaking different languages, and we can't agree anymore. It's just a power struggle. I don't believe we're there. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you can go first. Yeah, your hand up.
Thank you for holding this. I'm just wondering about what's happening in Georgia right now. Obviously, with the runoff, there's a lot of people concerned about the integrity of the election there. Is this apparatus operating in full scale? Are other issues being addressed before the election in Georgia?
We're seeing the same problems occur again. We are seeing Dropbox use. We're seeing Zuckerberg monies. We're also seeing the recruitment of people to move from one state to the next to register to vote in Georgia, which is concerning because all of us have an equal right to select our United States Congress. And they're actually inviting persons such that, for example, you could have voted for a United States senator in a state where the U.S. Senate seat was up and now move and vote for a second United States senator? No, that's not allowed. There are all kinds of problems with how Georgia is managing its elections, how they're handling absentee ballots, and we anticipate filing in Georgia to try to prevent some of these things from happening again. One of the challenges we had in suing the Center for Tech and Civic Life and the use of Mr. Zuckerberg's monies before the election is that the harm can't be proven until after the election. And you have to prove harm to have what is called standing with the courts. But now we've seen what this causes, and we're hopeful that the court will recognize that the breaking of the chain of custody, all of this evidence that the ballots cannot be audited or traced back, will cause the court to say, whoa, wait a minute, this is wrong. I have to say that I'm deeply concerned about our courts. I'm concerned about their unwillingness to engage in what is clear evidence of violation of state legislature mandates on elections. I somewhat understand it. They want to wash their hands of things and say it's a political issue. You go fix it. But we've had an unprecedented election with private interests dictating how elections will be managed. It's never happened like this in United States history. It demands a judicial response. I'm not confident we will get it because, unfortunately, in some ways, the court has become political as well.
And that ties in with my last question is, how did we sort of get to this point where we see so many issues coming out of the election? Was it a breakdown in the judicial system, no enforcement over a long period of time? Is it the executive branch? How did all of this sort of mess come about?
Well, in a broad sense, I'll say this, and forgive me if I'm redundant, and I've already said this. I believe one of our nation's greatest strengths is America gets what it wants, and one of our greatest weaknesses is America gets what it wants. I believe the American people have chosen distraction and noise rather than the hard work of digging down and understanding the truth and then demanding a response to the truth as we learn it. That demand has to come to our elected officials. It has to come from the American people. Our legislatures and our Congress have been deficient in watching and making sure our elections are conducted properly, consistent with law. We have privatized things to the point that election officials have no direct control over what happens. And in some ways, they've enjoyed that because they get to wash themselves of responsibility and say it wasn't my fault. You know, you pass a law that says elections will be fair, and then you claim credit for passing the law without actually ensuring that they are fair. And I'll say this, we didn't anticipate this. Who can anticipate we'd be arguing over the meaning of the word place? Or whether a human being is a box? So that erosion in our culture, in the understanding of truth, was not anticipated in law. So in some ways, I don't foist all the responsibility on the legislature, but they need to wake up. Because the truth is, right now, and we will be filing litigation in this regard, right now, the primary body with the responsibility of determining the outcome of the presidential election under the Constitution is state legislatures. And they can't even meet. Since November 3rd, they haven't been able to meet. What vigilance is that? To have the responsibility of determining whether the election was fair and lawful, and then never meeting to determine whether the election was fair and lawful. That, all of those things have contributed to allowing this to be, and it can't happen again. It can't happen again. So my understanding in speaking with legislators and others is they are committed to it not happening again. And I would hope Democrats, once we get past, is it Trump or Biden, we've got to get towards how do we do fair elections? And that's going to take both parties. And we've got to stop this rhetoric, and journalists have to do their job. Journalists have to insist on it and not just accept simple responses.
Well, that follows into my question. We've seen the mainstream media basically go silent on all this covering other than the great outlets that are here today. Have we heard a response from Zuckerberg about all of this? And my second question is, there's millions of Americans out there that have not seen this information. And if they saw this information, maybe their outlook on the election would change. And so if and when all of this is reversed, it kind of makes it a little easier to take, knowing of all the corruption that was involved. So how do we get this information out? And how can people understand it so that they can process what needs to be changed?
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here. That's so vitally important. You know, there are two things you need to control if you're going to control a nation: the flow of information and how a nation elects its leaders. And Mr. Zuckerberg has checked both boxes. Moreover, some of those leaders that he has put in place are advocating continued shutdowns and restrictions on American freedoms. That is enabling one of the largest shifts in wealth in United States history. Mom and pop businesses are dying. Chain businesses, big box stores, Amazon, all of those groups are flourishing. We're close to creating a corporate oligarchy in this nation. And I do believe this. I believe once you get past mainstream media, and if you can capture the interest of the American, as we saw with the polling, over half of Americans, 54%, if you consider those who are unsure, believe that there was some problem with this election. I believe there's a larger number than that if they get their information and take the time to challenge the information that they receive, rather than just receive it. So I do believe that this nation has the deepest reservoir of an understanding of the importance of a democratic republic and the belief that all persons are created equal than any nation on the face of the globe. Communicating with them, letting them see the danger. And I would encourage them to do this. I would encourage them not to think about how this is affecting me directly. Not only to focus on that, but to focus how it's affecting others. Because what tyrannies do is they tick off those and limit the rights of those who are challenging them. They don't take on an entire society. They take on a portion of the society, and then they spread and take on others. And what we're seeing right now with the actions of the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, the actions and comments of the Secretary of State, the shuttering of the state capitol by Governor Whitmer, are the first steps in trying to limit dissent. Dissent. That should awaken every American. We all need to fight for each other's right to speak, and we need to also challenge this belief that flattening the curve has to become crush the dream. We need to protect our vulnerable and not quarantine the healthy. We need to allow the science to flow through state legislatures and not emanate from the mouths of executive officials who have rendered the state legislature impotent in debating policy that affects every American life. And we need to teach the importance of those basic values that are American. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's what we must continue to do. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan's Secretary of States recently, I think it was yesterday, had a big Zoom call. They broadcasted it on C-SPAN. And they talked about how it was extremely secure. It was a historic level of security of the election. What would you say to them?
How many of you believe that? I mean, if it was, why not open the door? If it was, why is Secretary Benson trying to prevent the release of a forensic report relating to the machines? If it was, why weren't Republicans allowed in the counting room? If it was, why not explain why $500 million of private money dictating the manner in which elections were to be run was allowed into the management of the elections? You know, all of these secretaries of state have acted contrary to their expressions. I have never investigated somebody. And again, I'm not saying that this is criminal, okay? It's important to understand that. There's a difference between violating statute that protects the integrity of the elections and committing a crime. There's a profound difference. And you don't have to prove a crime to prove that the election didn't follow the law or invite fraud. But I've never investigated anybody who was guilty who wanted me to see the evidence that they possessed and controlled. And I've never investigated anybody who was innocent who didn't want me to see the evidence that proves their innocence that they possess and control. Open up the doors. If it is that safe, let's get the ballots. We can take ballots and we can take envelopes, and it's very easy to do forensic analysis to determine whether they were fraudulently cast. If it was done fairly, why was there the intentional destruction of the chain of custody of ballots from drop boxes? If it was done fairly and openly and securely, why do we have affidavits of people who said they were taught to commit fraud? Democrat employees of Democrat cities saying they were trained to commit fraud. If it was done fairly, then where is Jesse's trailer? 250,000 filled out ballots disappear on a trailer that has GPS. And they can't find it? They'd rather speak to his mother and his ex-wife. If these things were done fairly, they would be acting much differently. So I have my doubts, and by goodness, as an American citizen, I have a right to have my doubts. All of us do. 54% of Americans do, and we have the right to answers, not this, don't worry, nothing's going on. There's no fraud here. It doesn't cut it.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions. First one is that are you going to file a lawsuit on all these illegal issues? And if you do or you don't, is there anyone who is eligible to file all these lawsuits on these illegal things? And my second question is that in addition to these domestic issues, have you ever found any evidence or clues that the foreign agencies or entities get involved? Thank you.
Okay. The first question is, are we going to file litigation? And we've got another filing we're going to do later this week. By the way, just recently we filed in every state a demand of these swing states to preserve all evidence, to stop the shredding like what went on in Cobb County, to prevent the current erasing of digital data that was ordered, for example, by the Secretary of State of Michigan on December 1st, to erase some poll book information, to prevent all of that. My wife is giving me signs. I can't tell what you're trying to tell me, dear.
4th.
December 4th, thank you. Not December 1st, December 4th, thank you. That the Secretary of State of Michigan ordered. So, but we are also filing litigation, and here's what this litigation is that these state legislatures have delegated their responsibility under the Constitution unlawfully to the executive branch because they can't even meet right now to determine whether the election was conducted properly. And a legislature violates the separation of powers when it gives all of its power away to another branch of government. The separation of powers was a primary design in the United States to prevent government from eroding personal freedoms. We wanted debate. We wanted challenges. We wanted these groups to wrestle with one another in power to kind of constrain government in many ways from infringing on personal freedom. And our lawsuit that we'll be filing tomorrow or within a couple of days says that it was improper for the legislature to give all of this power away, so it can't even meet at this important time after an election. And your second question, sir, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was.
Is there any foreign agencies getting involved? Thank you.
Well, let me just describe this. The vulnerability of our digital footprint in elections has been known for several years. In fact, in 2016, the FBI estimated that over half of our poll books were penetrated by foreign interests. So this digital concern is real. The same digital concern exists with these companies that provide the machines. Most people don't know that most of the aggregation of the vote on election night, now these aren't the official results, but what the media reports and where the media claims a victor, which has significant impact, as you know, in how Americans perceive the election, right? That is all aggregated on Amazon World Services on the cloud. Now, that aggregation allows the media to pull down the data, but what's on the cloud can also be hacked. And if you go to many of these websites, official state websites, and you look at the unofficial results on election night and you click on it, it's going to reroute you to a site that's hosted on foreign soil. That's well known. The company that is primarily designed, for example, with Clarity Elections. Clarity Elections is the hosting service for the company called Hart that provides a lot of machines around the nation. The software and the hosting site is done by a company called Scytl, S-C-Y-T-L. They're out of Barcelona, Spain. So there is, yes, plenty of evidence that foreign interests are tied into our digital footprint and how we manage elections. And that needs to be discussed and openly discussed in this nation, whether we want to continue in that fashion. I believe that there's significant vulnerabilities. So we should go back, quite honestly, to paper. America was in the counting room in Bush v. Gore. We all got to look at the ballot and decide whether it was valid. And we can keep the paper, and we can audit the paper, and we can do so with efficiency. But the primary aim should not be efficiency behind closed doors. It should be transparency and accuracy. Paper gives it to you. Thank you all. We greatly appreciate your time.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yesterday, the United States witnessed a medical miracle. The first doses of a COVID vaccine were administered to frontline workers across the country. The president promised a safe and effective vaccine in record time, and President Trump delivered. Earlier this year, we heard from several news outlets and so-called fact checks that President Trump would need, quote, a miracle to be right. That was an NBC News article. We were told, according to Healthline, quote, a vaccine will still take more than a year to develop. USA Today warned us that, quote, despite medical researchers' progress, a vaccine, quote, was more than a year away. And National Geographic even told us that achieving a vaccine within, quote, a year to 18 months would be absolutely unprecedented, end quote. These reports deserve their own fact check. False. President Trump has not only been the optimist, hopeful to achieve a vaccine by year's end, he has also been a leader. Through Operation Warp Speed, President Trump, the businessman, and the president, as the innovator, has succeeded. President Trump directed military logistics experts at the Department of Defense to partner with health experts at Health and Human Services to ensure prompt delivery of vaccines and equipment. This includes the appointment of 4-star General Perna, who oversees the global supply chain and readiness for the United States Army, as Operation Warp Speed's Chief Operating Officer. The Trump administration supported clinical trials by working to enroll participants through NIH-funded COVID protection networks and provided funding and technical support through the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease and Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. President Trump also directed industrial-scale manufacturing of vaccines to take place at its own risk before knowing whether these vaccines would be successful. It was a novel approach, indeed, to vaccine development led by President Trump. The results of these historic investments will benefit the American people and will mark the beginning of the end of the pandemic. As the first doses of the vaccine are delivered and administered, we urge all Americans to continue to wash your hands, socially distance, wear a mask when you are unable to do so. We also encourage those at the state level to improve the early and aggressive use of monoclonal antibody treatments, especially among vulnerable Americans. The Trump administration led the way, approving monoclonal antibody treatments for outpatient use, issuing 2 emergency use authorizations in November. Additionally, through HHS's Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, monoclonal antibody patient courses have been allocated to all 50 states. Together, these steps can play a significant role changing the course of the virus. Thank you to President Trump, and with that, I will take questions. Ben.
Kelly, now that the Electoral College has voted, does the president acknowledge that Joe Biden is the president-elect? Does he have any plans to invite him here to the White House?
The president is still involved in ongoing litigation related to the election. Yesterday's vote was one step in the constitutional process, so I will leave that to him and refer you to the campaign for more on that litigation.
What is his reaction to Leader McConnell today congratulating Joe Biden and calling him the president-elect?
I haven't gotten the president's reaction to that yet, but the president, again, is pursuing ongoing litigation, would refer you to the campaign for further.
And what's the path forward, though, for litigation? If the votes have been certified, if the Electoral College has voted, there doesn't seem to be a legal recourse at this point.
The campaign would have more specifics for you on legal recourse, but yesterday was one step in the constitutional process leading up to the January 20th date in the Constitution. Steve.
Does the president plan to take the vaccine and really do it in a public way to inspire confidence among people?
So the president...
Working remotely didn't stop Disney's a cappella sensation De Cappella. When tasked to film the under-the-sea video from home, they got all their tools fast and conveniently from Office Depot and OfficeDepot.com to keep business going.
Currently, at this moment, as said, he is absolutely open to taking the vaccine. He's been emphatic about that to me privately and to you all publicly. But he did recently recover from COVID. He has the continued protective effects of the monoclonal antibody cocktail that I mentioned. And he will receive the vaccine as soon as his medical team determines it's best. But his priority is frontline workers, those in long-term care facilities, and he wants to make sure that the vulnerable get access first. Yes.
Wouldn't him taking the vaccine set an example for Americans to give them confidence? Dr. Fauci, as well as Montez Salui, both said today that they think President Trump should get the vaccine. Because for himself, would be to set an example. Will he do that? Like, why not do it just to show Americans that it's safe?
Because he also wants to show Americans that our priority are the most vulnerable. There will be some senior administration officials taking it publicly to instill that confidence. It is very important. And the president, no, but you'll learn in the next few days who that is, who those individuals will be. But they will be taking it publicly to instill confidence. The president wants to send a parallel message, which is, our long-term care facility residents and our frontline workers are paramount in importance, and he wants to set an example in that regard.
Do you personally think
I absolutely would be open to taking the vaccine. As has been reported and as I shared with some of you yesterday, the White House, it will be a very limited group of people who have access to it initially. The president's tweet indicated that the White House should receive it at a later date to, again, prioritize the most vulnerable. But some career staff, national security staff, for the purposes of continuity of government, will have access, in addition to a very small group of senior administration officials for the purpose of instilling public confidence.
He has said that he thinks Americans will be able to take it if they want to take it. You're saying he's open to taking it. Is he going to encourage Americans to take it, or is he going to leave it up to Americans? Does he think Americans should get this shot?
Absolutely. Look, these are vaccines that he oversaw the development of. He has great confidence in. He wants to see all Americans get this vaccine, and he wants to see the most vulnerable among us get it first. But absolutely, he will be encouraging Americans to take this. Yeah. David.
Do you know specifically when the president will veto the National Defense Authorization Act, when he's going to send the paperwork over? And why would he veto that, given the fact it passed on veto-proof majorities in Congress?
So he still does plan to veto the NDAA. Don't have a timeline for you on that, but he does plan to veto it. He wants to make every effort to protect our military men and women, and will prioritize military funding in the big omnibus bill. But he also has other important priorities and I should say problems with the NDAA beyond just the absence of Section 230 repeal and beyond the inclusion of the Warren Amendment. One of the provisions of concern is provisions about troop withdrawal and deployment in Afghanistan, South Korea, and Germany. And so there are a number of provisions that he is.
Said it was weak on China, but no Republican really seems to agree with on that. Why does he think the bill is bad on China?
So by not including a Section 230 repeal, what you're in effect allowing is Twitter to continue to not censor Chinese propaganda. Recently, there was a tweet by the U.S., the Chinese embassy in the United States about the Xinjiang province and allowing all citizens to enjoy the same rights, including freedom of religion. That clearly is not the case, as the Uyghurs have been absolutely tortured in that province. There was another tweet that they allowed about the virus originating in Wuhan. They said it did not originate in Wuhan. That obviously is Chinese disinformation, and the president's priority is to ensure that that isn't permitted. Yes.
Did Leader McConnell give the president a heads up that he was going to talk about Biden on the floor today?
I'm not sure if he had any call with him prior to making that statement.
Okay. And is Secretary Mnuchin or Chief Meadows going to be involved in this bipartisan meeting that's happening on the Hill today at 4 o'clock about COVID relief?
I believe it's just congressional leaders meeting, but I'll get back to you if there is a White House presence there. But what I can tell you is that the White House has had a continuous presence in the stimulus talks leading on this for months, trying to get this phase 4 passed. And when I spoke with the chief about this again this morning, he noted that Nancy Pelosi has really been standing in the way of a deal going back prior to the election when she was anti-stimulus checks, something the president has been vocal about wanting. And then after the election, according to her, quote, she can now support these checks because of a, quote, new president were her words, which is appalling to think that politics was playing into COVID relief for the American people. And she stood against liability protection. This is protection for our small businesses so that they're not held liable for COVID incidences through no fault of their own. And she's really playing up to the trial lawyers and opposing liability protection, which should be something that's just mere common sense.
One other question about confirmations of Biden's cabinet picks. President Trump had the benefit of the Senate starting hearings and starting the process before he was inaugurated in January of 2017. Does the president oppose the Senate taking up Joe Biden's nominees before the inauguration?
I think that's a hypothetical, and he won't get ahead of that activity actually happening. But he has taken all statutory requirements necessary to either ensure a smooth transition or a continuation of power. Yes.
Thanks, Kayleigh. Given the success of Operation Warp Speed, why hasn't President Trump been more visible during this initial vaccine rollout? You have the vice president in Indiana today. Where's President Trump?
President Trump's been hard at work on COVID behind the scenes. Just because you don't see him at the podium every day doesn't mean that he's not aggressively pursuing actions on behalf of the American people. He's briefed on COVID regularly, and I'm here speaking with you guys. Others are out communicating this information. Yeah.
Could you comment on the Russian hackers breaching several federal agencies? How serious was this breach, and is the Trump administration considering retaliating?
Look, the U.S. government, we're aware of all of these reports. We're taking all necessary steps to identify and remedy any possible issues related to the situation. As one step in that process, CISA has issued an emergency directive on Sunday night for all federal civilian agencies to review their networks for indicators of compromise and disconnect or to power down SolarWinds Orion products immediately. So we are taking a hard look on this and obviously take any sort of cyber hacks very seriously.
And just one more question on Russia. Since Russian President Vladimir Putin has congratulated President-elect Joe Biden, any comment on that from the Russian president?
No comment on that. I'll leave it to the president to react to that.
Has he spoken to President Trump?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Let's see. David.
Does the president intend to run for election in 2024, and would you like to be part of that campaign?
I will leave that to the president, but he's still pursuing ongoing litigation at the moment for this election. Yes. Ty.
Thanks. President Trump supported the Texas lawsuit at the Supreme Court, and a lawsuit that President-elect Biden called an assault on democracy. How is it not anti-democratic to try to nullify 20 million votes?
I think pursuing legitimate litigation through the judicial system is in no way assaulting democracy. In fact, it's using Democrat institutions in the manner they are to be used to pursue legitimate claims with sworn affidavits and additional evidence. But I do think what is an assault on democracy are the 4 investigations into President Trump over Russia collusion that turned up nothing. I mean, Mueller alone, you had 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 search warrants, millions of taxpayer dollars, all to find no collusion. And the investigation into President Trump began far before he was even elected president of the United States. And his intel briefings in the transition period were even weaponized against him. An insurance policy from Peter Strzok was put in place against this president prior to him being elected. That is what is an assault on democracy. Blake.
Haley, I want to ask you about COVID relief negotiations, but just to hone down on what was asked about the vaccine, yes or no, we should expect to see President Trump take a coronavirus vaccine before January 20th and do so on camera?
He will take it when health experts and his White House doctor ask him to do so and says it's the appropriate time. He is very open to taking this, but also wants to prioritize our frontline workers. Since you brought up the vaccine, before you get to your next question, one thing I do want to make clear is that there are 2.9 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine that have gone out. In 21 days, there will be an additional 2.9 million of those doses, because of course the Pfizer vaccine is 2 doses. And there are going to be rolling updates and shipments of the vaccines. Of course, we've secured millions in advance. And this Friday, there will be 4 million Pfizer vaccines going out. We are hopeful that Moderna gets approved. The FDA said that the data looks good. We're waiting for that EUA. So hopefully there will be that EUA and then an additional 6 million Moderna doses out next week. So 10 million doses out next week. And I want to emphasize, just stepping back from a macro perspective, because it is so impressive what this president did, making these agreements in advance. And he secured not just tens of millions of doses, but in fact, hundreds of millions. There's the 100 million with Pfizer. There's 100 million with Moderna. We've secured another 100 million from Moderna. We're hopeful that we will get an additional 100 million from Pfizer. I think we will. And then Johnson & Johnson is nearing the end of its phase 3 clinical trial. That's another 100 million doses secured, with hundreds of millions doses more if needed. And then AstraZeneca, which is in phase 3 clinical trial, 300 million doses secured. So it's a really impressive achievement what this president has done. But what's your next question?
Negotiations. So there's this meeting this afternoon, the big 4 up on the Hill. We're told, by the way, that Secretary Mnuchin will be there. If the big 4, if the Treasury Secretary are able to come to some sort of a deal, would President Trump sign off on it, or does he have specific asks specific red lines that have to be in any sort of deal?
I think we'll wait to see what that deal looks like. He's said that he would really like to see those stimulus checks in there, but his priority at the end of the day is getting relief to the American people. We're hopeful there will be some sort of agreement, but I would note that we've been the party that's been flexible. We've been the party that's said, hey, standalone PPP, that's funding for small businesses and funding for businesses generally to go to pay their employees. We've had a standalone bill that we supported there. We had a standalone unemployment insurance bill. So we've been the party that's been flexible in this.
Clear, if there is a deal that doesn't have direct payments, the president would support it or not?
I'm not going to say if that's a red line or not. I won't get ahead of the negotiations, but I'll just say that we are hopeful there is a deal there that the president can then look at and support.
Yes, Catherine. Does the White House have any comment on Privy Bailey, the security director who had his leg amputated due to COVID?
Yeah, our heart goes out to his family. They've asked for privacy, and he is recovering from what I understand. We're very pleased to see that, but he and his family will be in our prayers.
And has the president had a chance to speak with him?
I'm not sure if the president's had a private conversation with him, nor would I confirm any private conversation that he did have. Luis.
Thank you for doing this. Over the weekend, a statue of Mahatma Gandhi was desecrated by some protesters in downtown DC. This is for the second time this has happened. I would like to have your comments on that.
Yeah, it's terrible. No statue or memorial should be desecrated, and certainly not one like that of Gandhi, who really fought for the values that America represents of peace, justice, and freedom. So that desecration is appalling to see. It's appalling that it's happened more than once, and we believe the reputation of Mahatma Gandhi should be respected, especially here in America's capital.
Ask one more?
Sure.
Does the president believe that the democracy in the United States is under threat? And based on the streets, what are the electoral reforms he wants to push in this country?
What was the first part of your question? I couldn't.
Does the president believe that democracy in the United States is under threat?
That democracy is under threat. He believes that it certainly was under assault when it comes to the investigations into his administration, the Mueller probe, the unfortunate way that our FBI was mishandled by folks like Andy McCabe, by folks like Jim Comey, and weaponized in a political way against his candidacy and then against his presidency. Yes, Charlotte.
Thanks, Caitlin. Is President Trump planning to take any action after seeing the forensic audit of the machines in Antrim County, Michigan?
I'd have to refer you to the campaign on anything regarding the election.
Just as far as the 2018 executive order on election interference, has he received a report yet? And when he does receive it, is any of that going to be available for the public to look at?
I am not aware of any report that he's received to that end.
Chanel. Thank you, Kelly. Just want an update statement on Iran, especially in light of the just signed Israel-Morocco deal. Where does the White House see that Iran standing in the Middle East now? Especially, what is the current assessment from the White House with regards to Iran standing in the Middle East as you continue to sign Middle East deals? Are they going to strengthen? Is it weakening? What is the current White House assessment on Iran?
Yeah, as the region increasingly comes together through these peace deals, which Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, Avi Berkowitz, and others, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien deserve a ton of credit for. It's remarkable. But as the region continues to come together, our maximum pressure campaign continues to be effective. Iran is increasingly isolated and weakened. And when President Trump came into office, you know that the region was in extreme turmoil. ISIS had a caliphate, and Iran's proxies were wreaking havoc. Since taking office, President Trump has worked to rebuild trust with our regional partners and identify their shared interests. And unlike the previous administration, which gave Iran piles of cash and a deal with a sunset provision that would have allowed them to get nuclear weapons, this president has isolated Iran, and he's done it through 4 peace deals, which is 4 more than his predecessor. But it's unfortunate that it doesn't give much coverage in the mainstream media. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised, because in the last 24, 48 hours, there have been quite a few stories that have not gotten a ton of coverage in the mainstream media. As former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer said, bias is often found in stories the press does not cover. And last week we found out that Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell was infiltrated by an alleged Chinese spy. This spy cozied up to Swalwell, raised funds for his 2014 campaign, and even planted an intern in his office. And that relationship continued until the FBI briefed him in 2015. And that was some very good reporting done by Axios. But after entangling with this spy for years, Swalwell hypocritically went on to be one of the lead instigators of the Russia collusion hoax in the impeachment sham. Swalwell wrote this on his congressional webpage: President Trump and his team are directly and indirectly tied to Russia. That was not true. He then said in September of 2020, the president has a compromised relationship with Russia. Untrue. April of 2019, he said President Trump certainly acts on Russia's behalf and acts like Russia's leader. Not true. January 2019, Eric Swalwell said it's pretty clear President Donald Trump is an agent of Russia. Not true. And Swalwell shamelessly claimed Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner had an eagerness and a willingness to work with the Russians during the 2016 election. Again, it was false. In 2019, he falsely claimed this yet again when inquired about collusion by a reporter. And these baseless attacks were false, yet covered breathlessly by the media. There was no coverage, however, of Swalwell being the one implicated with not Russia, but China. In fact, the New York Times website, as of this morning, had not one result for Eric Swalwell's ties to Chinese spies. Not one result. And when the Swalwell story broke, guess how many minutes of coverage it got on ABC, NBC, MSNBC, and CBS? 0. CNN devoted 3 minutes and 16 seconds to it. However, it was covered on Fox. Interesting pre-election and post-election coverage, too, on the Hunter Biden scandal, which was not covered at all by many outlets in the lead up to the election. In fact, on October 15th, you had a New York Times headline that said, Trump said to be warned that he was being given Russian disinformation over Hunter Biden.
Working remotely didn't stop Disney's a cappella sensation De Cappella. When tasked to film the under-the-sea video from home, they got all their tools fast and conveniently from Office Depot and OfficeDepot.com to keep business going.
Now, December 10th, just a few months later, New York Times headline, investigation of Hunter Biden is likely to hang over Biden as he takes office. Washington Post on October 16th, the headline read, the truth behind the Hunter Biden non-scandal. Now you have the Washington Post headline that says this, Hunter Biden tax probe examining Chinese business deals. Politico, October 19th, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation. That's a favorite. Dozens of former intel officials say, false yet again. December 2nd, now Politico reads, Justice Department's interest in Hunter Biden covered more than taxes. Really interesting turn of events, and good for those who covered what was a story all along and not.
Well, hello, Michigan. Great to be with you. Great. Special place. It's great to be back in this incredible state with thousands of loyal, hardworking American patriots. We're all patriots. 17 days from now, we're going to win the state of Michigan. We're going to win 4 more years in the White House. I'd like to speak with you today about one of the most vital issues in this race. You know what it is? It's the radical left's plan to erase American history, purge American values, and destroy the American way of life. And that's what they're trying to do. You see it every day. That's what they're trying to do. We're not going to let that happen. This election will decide whether we preserve our magnificent heritage or whether we allow far-left radicals to wipe it all away. That's not going to happen. Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, has made a corrupt bargain in exchange for his party's nomination. He has handed control of his party over to the hardcore, militant left. You know that. You see that every day. The Democrat Party you once knew just no longer exists, right? This is not the same party. These people are crazy. It's now the party of socialists, Marxists, and left-wing extremists If Biden wins, the lawless demonstrators in our streets that are around Democrat-run cities and state, not Republican-run. These are Democrat-run, and we want to go in, and we want to help them, and largely they don't want to be helped. It's an incredible thing. But they're all over our streets, and these areas will be ended. We want to end it. We want to end it. And you know, in theory, they're supposed to say, please come in. They don't like to say it. Minneapolis, they said it. We went in, and boy, did that take about, 30 minutes to solve that problem. And that's why we're going to win Minnesota. Hasn't been won since 1972 by a Republican. We're going to win Minnesota. Of course, having people like Omar doesn't hurt either. Omar, Ilhan Omar, she doesn't love our country too much. I don't think so. They crave power, and God help us if they ever did get it. God help us. I can tell you that. You just have to look all over the world at different places. God help us. This election day, the people of Michigan must stop these anti-American radicals by issuing Joe Biden and his group a thundering defeat at the ballot box. And by the way, it seems to be happening. Seems to be happening. I don't want to speak too early, but you know, there's a big story out right now. Do you know that? You know about it, right? You know, we're supposed to be way behind until Election Day when all the Republicans go and you're going to have a red wave like you've never seen before. And even the fake news media is saying that. We're going to have a wave. We're going to have a wave like you've never seen before, but we're supposed to be way behind, you know, for the first few days. So it just came out. We're leading. What's that? Early voting. But let's not talk about it. It doesn't mean, you know what they call that? An early maybe signal, right? Maybe. Who knows? But there's a lot of concern going on out there. This sounds like a little bit like 4 years ago, but this should be much bigger because we've done everything we said and more. You know, we've done it all. We brought in your case, we brought your plants back. You remember 12 years ago or so, I got Man of the Year in Michigan. I said, well, that's nice. I came to Michigan, and I made this speech like, why are you allowing them to take your automobile business, your car-making business? Why are you allowing them to take it to Mexico and Canada and every place else? Why are you allowing? I made this big deal. I actually got blasted for it. You know, they named me Man of the Year, and I'm complaining, right? But no, I hated it's probably why I'm here. It's probably the number one thing, what they were doing to us in trade. But now Michigan has many, many factories. You didn't have a factory built for 40 years. Now you have many factories being built, already built, and a lot of them being expanded. It's a whole different ballgame. Whole different ballgame. And they come in from Japan. I'll tell you, just retired, a great man, Prime Minister Abe. And I said to him 6 months ago, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you got to get us some more factories. You're selling cars to us. We're not taxing you. You know, a lot of crazy policies, but you got to get us. And he said, well, this is a thing for companies. I said, you have great power. He said, well, the government doesn't get involved. You got to do it. And he said, well, we will look into it. Next day, they announced 5 factories coming in. And he was a great prime minister and a great guy. He's a friend of ours. And he was forced. He had a medical difficulty, but I'll tell you what a fabulous guy. But what you're doing in Michigan has been amazing. Now, you got to get your governor to open up your state, okay? And get your schools open. Get your schools open. The schools have to be open, right? Lock them all up. And by the way, you can show all these people. Look where that goes, all the way over to there, and all the way. You can show. Turn the cameras. Why don't you turn? They never like turning the cameras. They never like to show the kind of crowds. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Go ahead, turn your camera. Go ahead, turn it. They hate to do it. They hate to show the crowds. You know, if you're watching television, which a lot of people are when we do this stuff, or they wouldn't put us on, but they always have like this face right here. This, and about 4 people behind. We've actually made a couple of stars. You know, there's somebody behind me here, here, here. They try and show as few people as possible. And if they had a certain look, it worked out pretty well. They became stars, right? That's the way it works. That's the way it works. But, you know, it's an honor to have it. We're having these crowds, in all fairness, all over the country. I don't even say anymore, is it a big crowd? I just get off the plane and we talk. And the spirit is so incredible. Our enthusiasm is so incredible. It's so incredible. No, the spirit is incredible. I don't think there's ever been anything like that little phrase. I won't even say it because they'll say, oh, why is he bringing that up? So I won't say it, but you said. But that's never been used before. Nobody's ever heard that before. And we like Ronald Reagan. We like a lot of people. Nobody's ever heard that phrase before. You know why? Because there's people, first of all, we've made tremendous progress. We've rebuilt our military. We've cut your taxes at the highest level. We've gotten rid of more regulations than any president in history, no matter how long they were in office. Oh, by the way, we just set a record. By the end of the first term, we will have had maybe even more than 300 federal judges and 3 great Supreme Court justices. Right? So you have Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, and you have Amy is going through right now. She's great. She's done amazingly well. It's amazing to watch her compared to some of these radical left senators. It's like from a different ball game, right? It's like, go ahead. Go ahead. Hold up. Would like to see your notes. Oh, okay, here they are. There's nothing. Unlike Joe, she doesn't need notes. It's nice, right? Joe, he takes out the other day, did you see it? He takes out notes. $200 billion. He's lost it. You know that. The modern left does not use reason or persuasion to advance their cause. They use intimidation, coercion, and control, and worse. They demand absolute allegiance or else. And you saw that yesterday. Did you see Dianne Feinstein? Lindsey Graham's a good guy. You know, they're friendly. They've been working forever together. And she happened to grab him. He grabbed her. You know, it's a friendly. They want to destroy the woman. These people are sick. I know we want to bring it all together, but we got to sort of work on these things. One of the most sinister weapons of the extreme left culture is a thing called cancel or cancel culture. They want to cancel our entire heritage. If you do not repeat each and every one of their lies, you will be banned, censored. Big tech titans, what they do, they harass, they expel. They fire you from your job or deny the chance to earn a living. Here in Michigan, a teacher was fired for tweeting that Trump is our president. She got fired. Where is she? Is she here tonight? Now, can you imagine? But you know, we got a lot of people that like that. We like that person a lot. Whoever you are, we love you, and we'll be there for you. We'll be there. Did you hear about that? I mean, did you hear about that? Nobody told me you're going to have 40-mile-an-hour winds today. Would somebody give me a hat? Will you please give me a hat? I got all these hats. I'm the only one without a hat on. Give me a hat. They'll get it. They'll go into that big, beautiful plane if they don't have a hat in that plane. Look at that. Is that beautiful? That's a beautiful plane. We have a beautiful country. Actually, I have the exact same plane. Can you see? Boeing 757. It's a beautiful plane. Look at that, though. Get me a hat out of that plane, please. In Ohio, a high school football player was suspended for displaying a flag honoring our great police. You saw that? When the New York Times published a piece by Senator Tom Cotton, by the way, great senator from Arkansas, great guy and great senator. The editor of the New York Times had to resign because they put Tom Cotton's brilliant, he's a brilliant person, brilliant student, brilliant everything. They put his piece in the New York Times, and the person that put it in had to resign. Can you believe this? When the Philadelphia Inquirer published a piece saying that rioters shouldn't destroy buildings, that was the end of that journalist. I mean, can you believe it? These are not the tactics of a respectable political movement. This is the behavior of fascists, and as bad as you can get. The point of cancel culture is not to convince you, it's to humiliate you and break you and control you. But the American people will never submit, we will never apologize, and we will not be controlled and never be broken. No, nobody's seen anything like what's going on. Now, in other countries, you have seen it. And those countries have, in every single case, ended up very badly. It's never going to happen to this country. And this country will never be a socialist country, just remember, ever. The most divisive and insidious strategy of the Marxists and the Democrats, socialists, and communists, in all fairness. You know, people say, oh, that's not nice to use. Well, that's, you know, that's the step. That's the next step. You know, that's where it goes. Is their crusade against American history, right? American history. And I just brought this out because they had things like, you wouldn't even believe this. They falsely and constantly smear America as a sinister and racist country that must be torn apart piece by piece. It has to be torn apart. We're not tearing anything apart. We're here today, and you know the truth. America is the most magnificent, most virtuous nation that has ever existed. The most. We've liberated millions from tyranny, rescued countless millions all around the world from poverty, and built the most exceptional republic in human history. There's never been anything close. And you know what? I have a little secret just in this group, this small group of thousands of people. We're getting better and better and stronger, and we're going to have the best year we ever had. Yet the radical left despises this glorious inheritance. They despise it. When you watch and you see AOC +3 and you see these people, they actually despise it. Last month, the mayor of Washington, D.C., released a report that proposed the idea of removing or altering the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, the statues of Benjamin Franklin, Andrew Jackson, and Christopher Columbus. No, I mean, this is a serious report. And he says they're sick. I agree. I'm not allowed to say that. No, this was a group, a star-spangled group. Let's get rid of the Washington Monument. Oh, that's a great idea, right? Now, these people, but you know what? We laugh and we smile, and everyone thinks it's... When this first started happening with statues of people that most of us, almost all of us, never heard of, you know, started on the... I said, be careful, because they'll go after Jefferson, Washington. They'll go after Lincoln. And that was 3 years ago, and a friend of mine came to me the other day. He said, you know, you said this was going to happen. I said, I did? He said, yeah, you did. You said all of a sudden it'll keep going up. They took out Robert E. Lee. They want to take out Grant. They want to take out anything. They basically want to take out our heritage. And we're not letting this happen. And Biden has absolutely no control. He's shot, number one. But even if he wasn't shot, he never had the kind of control that you have to be president. So then you have a group of people that want to blow up a gorgeous thing. You know, we were leading by so much. This thing wasn't even going to be an election, and then we had the plague come in. You know, I had to go back to work on this stuff. I didn't have to come to Michigan. I said, look, we're building all these plants. You got the best year. You had the best year last year that you've ever had. You're going to have a better year. You're going to have a better year. You're going to have a better year next year. But this thing was over. You know, look, nothing's ever over, right? But I would have had to work about 1/10, maybe less than that. It was essentially, we had the greatest economy, greatest employment, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, women, with a diploma from high school, without a diploma from high school, top of your class at MIT, it didn't matter. You had the greatest economy you ever had. And don't worry, you're going to have that next year. You're going to wait till you see the third quarter numbers. You're going to have great numbers, okay? You're going to have great numbers. But we had to close it up, and we saved millions of lives. It was supposed to be 2.2. The fake news never says that. But we are rebuilding, and we're doing things that you wouldn't believe. But this cancel culture. So when we started, and I had to start all over, and I had to do, we had to do things a lot different. Became a lot different country for a period of time because we had this horrible plague that came from China, and we're not going to forget that it came from China, and all over the world it went, and it came from China, okay? It came from China, the China virus. So things changed, and we signed an incredible trade deal with China, but the ink hadn't even dried, and this happened. But I made a speech at a magnificent place called Mount Rushmore, right? Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. And I made this speech, and I think it was a very good speech, and it was well received and all of that. It was so beautiful. The whole place, you have to see this. It was so beautiful. And the governor is fantastic. You know Christie, right? Fantastic. And the people are fantastic, and they're so proud of it. And then I read where they want to blow up Mount Rushmore. Before I got there, I mean, they want to blow it up. We want to blow the face off Mount Rushmore. I don't think that's happening. I think the people of South Dakota might not handle that too well. So it's not happening. But think of it. Where does this thinking come from? Where does this sickness come from? And we have to stop it, and we've been. Like Sleepy Joe said nothing when statues of Christopher Columbus. Think of that, Christopher Columbus. They want to blow up all the statues. Now, he just blew the Italian vote, by the way, so I don't know. Anybody who's Italian here by any chance? Okay. If you're Italian, do you happen to like Christopher Columbus? Christopher, huh? Christopher Columbus. Now, think of it. You're Italian. They want to blow up. You know, we had it, I think it was in New York. So they were going to rip down this gorgeous, right, New York, right? And the Italians circled it, they saw. That was the end of those people. They just sort of went away. You know, they're sitting there and standing there. And they had various things that they were holding. I won't get into that because they'll say, that's terrible. He's inciting violence, the president. No, but the Italians, a group of Italians that lived in the neighborhood, surrounded this particular statue. And after about 5 minutes of talk back and forth, the radical anarchists and the Antifa people that nobody ever liked to talk about, they don't like to say Antifa. You know, they don't like to say Antifa. They like to blame everything on the right. This is the left. They like to blame everything on the right. But the Antifa people, okay, so they wanted to do it. But when they saw this group of people, they said, you know what? Let's take a pass. Let's go someplace else and rip down the statue. But now they're not doing it too much because I signed into law. I signed a bill that gives you 10 years in jail if you rip down any federal statue. So this is the group, though. So this is the Statues and Memorial Recommendation using the mayor's position, Washington, D.C., or the National Capital Memorial Advisory Commission. Recommend the federal government remove, relocate the following: Christopher Columbus statue, Benjamin Franklin statue, Andrew Jackson, great general, really good president, a great general. Andrew Jackson, the Battle of New Orleans, right? Right, the ragtags, remember? He came in with the British, they came in their beautiful uniforms. He had the ragtags. The battle lasted about a half hour, right? They want to take that statue of Andrew Jackson down right away. Thomas Jefferson, that's a tough one to take down, right? Thomas Jefferson. They want to take down the Jefferson Memorial. Anybody see the Jefferson? I don't think we're moving. I'll tell you what. If I wasn't your president last summer, you may have the Jefferson Memorial taken down. It may be down. They weren't playing games. We weren't playing games either. The George Washington. Okay, here's the beauty. We want to take down the George Washington Memorial, the monument. Okay? Well, this is the commission. This is what we're dealing with, folks. This is what we're doing. Website. And they wanted to remove the name of George Washington from all of the places all over the country where they use it. Then they found out there's like 5,000 places. Now, we'll keep the name George Washington if you don't mind. If the media would perhaps put it correctly. A lot of people back there. There's always a lot of people. You know, you watch those red lights, and as soon as I start talking about the red lights go off because I know what I'm going to say. You know, Joe Biden said nothing when statues of Christopher Columbus were in trouble, and a heroic signer of the Declaration of Independence was removed by the Democrat politicians in his home state of Delaware, which he never leaves, in all fairness. Where's Joe Biden speaking today, Delaware? He doesn't speak. You know what he does? He gets up. How about his news conferences where the fake news media gives him the questions and the answers? They say, what do you think about this or that? And then he reads the answer. I've been doing this stuff not that long, and I haven't actually been doing it. Relatively speaking, I've been doing it for a very short period of time, right? In fact, that's one of the reasons they said I could never win. They said he's never been a politician. But the fact is, they gave him the questions. They gave him the answers. They will ask a question, and he will read to them the answer. And did you see the other night with George Stephanopoulos? It was like, you know, they call them softballs. And then I had to go on with that person, you know, that person. No, she was jumping out of her seat. She was jumping out of her seat. Thank you very much, Johnny. Everybody know Johnny? He's very conservative. He's a big star, and I hate to say this, it's very incorrect. You don't say it anymore, but the women really like him a lot. Thank you. Normally, when I have a hat, I like to take the tie off the back with it, right? This side. Is that all right, Johnny? Okay, thank you. Thank you all. So, last week, Biden, he attacked Christopher Columbus by refusing to recognize Columbus Day. And he wants to change the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Who likes that idea? Who likes it? What the heck are you saying? That's politically incorrect. See, what they don't understand is they're politically incorrect. So he wants to change it to Indigenous Peoples Day. Not as long as I'm president, let me just tell you that, okay? But this is what, you know what, that's just a point, but this is what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with. The radical left is eradicating our history, and weak Joe Biden will let them do it. Now, what about his vice presidential candidate? Hey, and by the way, I hope she's in good shape because a number of people in her group have caught COVID, as they say. So we all wish her best. Do we all wish her best? Yes, we do. We do. We hope she's doing well, but she's now, I guess, she's in seclusion, right? How did Mike Pence do against her? Done a great job, right? That was an easy one. I said, Mike, that was an easy one. He's been a great vice president, but he had an easy evening. I said, Mike, you had an easy evening. That's not fair. San Francisco just announced plans for a fascist purge of the names of local schools, erasing the names of Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson from all schools. What are we going to do about this, right? Local. That's Nancy Pelosi area, you know, that's Nancy. I always say, Nancy, go home and take care of the homeless in San Francisco. I've never seen, you know. So she does. She goes home and takes care of her home, which is a very beautiful home. They even want to erase the names of Democrat senators and Republican senators, current and past. You know, they want to erase the name of Clinton. Yeah, hey, that'll be next. That's a good. Crooked Hillary will take her name. Does she ever name her name? I don't know if she's got her name on anything, right? I don't know. If she does, I'm all for it. Take it down. Crooked Hillary. Are we having a good time? Is there ever a better place to be than a Trump rally, you know? And generally, we don't call it a rally because, you know, you're not allowed to have rallies because you can't meet more than 2 people. You know, they had a number of states, and they had it so that it was all against me. I think Minnesota, but a lot of them where you can't have a rally. And it said you cannot have groups larger than 3 people. You cannot have anything to do with politics. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do that. I said, well, wait a minute. So I'm now precluded from ever going to that state and talking to the people, which is really bad. They said, no, you can't do it. I said, well, is there any exclusion? Yes. Only protests, right? Exclusion is a protest. And they didn't even use the word peaceful. I do because I like to make it sound a little. The only thing you could do is you could protest, you could riot in the streets of Minneapolis, burn down their stores, you could beat the hell out of people, you could do whatever you want. So I said, I have an idea. Let's call all our rallies, which we do, peaceful protests. And now we have no legal problem. Because if we call this a rally, we'd have a problem. So we call it a peaceful protest. So officially, if anyone asks you, like the fake news when you're walking in, just say, no, this was a peaceful protest. Thank you very much. If you're a moderate Democrat or liberal who knows that your party has gone totally off the rails, you have a moral duty to immediately stop this lunacy. You must, by law, join the Republican Party. We welcome you to the Republican Party and the party of Abraham Lincoln. You know, I say that. A lot of people don't know that. That's the party of Trump. Yeah. Well, we've done a lot. I'll tell you, we've expanded this party. You see all the, in Michigan and all these places? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you really drive them crazy if you say 12 more years. 12. Then they say, he is a fascist. He is a fascist. What a group. Only in Michigan. Only in Michigan. So what all of the lawless rioters and flag burners have in common is that they're desperate to try and have a victory with a person that's totally unqualified mentally to be president, okay? He's unqualified, you know? No, he's unqualified. Ask yourself this question. Do you want to vote for the candidate supported by anti-American rioters, which he is? Or do you want to vote for the candidate supported by the heroes of law enforcement in virtually every instance? Biden will surrender our country to the mob. With your vote, we will save our country from the mob. We will make our country greater than ever before. To ensure that our nation honors the memory of American patriots, I'm establishing a beautiful, vast, it's going to be chosen in the very near future. We have many sites. A vast outdoor park that will feature the statues of all of the greatest Americans who have ever lived. It's going to be called the National Garden of American Heroes. Isn't that nice? Now, you know me from private life, so I'm thinking about calling it the Trump National Garden of America. Somebody said, why don't you go at the Trump net? I said, no, I don't think I got away with that one. To combat the toxic left-wing propaganda in our schools, I recently announced that we're launching a new pro-American lesson plan for students called the 1776 Commission. We will teach our children the greatness and glory of America, if they don't know it. But, you know, they're not being taught that. They're being taught that we're not great. I've also issued an executive order to prohibit the teaching of critical race theory in the federal government. Critical race theory is a Marxist doctrine. Oh, you're so lucky I'm your president, because that was getting out of... This was getting out of hand. This was getting out of hand. This was getting in the military. This was going all over the place. This was getting out of hand. Critical race theory is a Marxist doctrine that rejects the vision of Martin Luther King Jr. and all of our great forefathers, and instead forces people to judge each other based on race, skin color, and other things that we're not supposed to be thinking about. We're not supposed to be in any way, shape, or form thinking about. Critical race theory teaches that America is an evil country and that you are part of this oppression from the moment you're born. I will not allow federal taxpayer dollars to be used to spread anti-American propaganda. And I went a step further because I ended it for government. And some of these guys were getting paid $350,000 a year to destroy our country, by the way. I ended it, and then I was told that it's outside of our... It's really an evil deal going on, and very racist, very racist. And I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, we have a lot of companies that do business with our country. You know, defense companies, a lot of big companies. And I said, so what's going on? Well, they're teaching it there, too. So I signed another one just 2 weeks ago, saying that if you do that, you cannot do business with the United States of America. And it was rather incredible how fast all of those people were fired. That was the end of that. But they're lurking. You know, they're part of a problem, and they're lurking out there. They're smart. They're plenty smart. We must reject left-wing hate and unite as one proud national family. If Sleepy Joe Biden and the Democrat socialists are elected, every citizen in America will be subjected to their extreme ideology. Possessed by this Marxist madness, they'll kill your jobs, dismantle your police departments, dissolve your borders, raise your taxes, destroy your suburbs. I saved your suburbs. Women, suburban women, you're supposed to love Trump. I got rid of the regulation. I can't believe it. They can't. You know, the fake news keeps saying that suburban women don't like me because I don't sound nice. I don't have time to be nice. I got a lot of work to do for you. But I think I'm nice. I want to be nice. I want to help people. But no, you had a regulation that will destroy, and it has been over the years. I've been watching it for a long time. They want to build low-income housing projects right next to your house. Would you like a nice low-income housing project next to your suburban, beautiful ranch-style house? Generally speaking, no. No, everybody he says, let Joe live there. Who said that? No, you did. Very good. I think that's good. Every once in a while you hear these like pearls of wisdom from the audience. He goes, let Joe live there. You know, Joe lives pretty well for a guy that has been a politician all his life. But they want to fund extreme late-term abortion, pack your Supreme Court. Well, look, then you gotta get out and vote. Of course, based on what I'm reading, Michigan, a lot of you have gotten out and vote. Hey, is that vote still crazy like it was? Is it still like, because, you know, I'm just wondering, maybe it's just an aberration. It's early. It's only been a few days, right? But maybe it's, that's a big thing, you know, to me. That's a big thing. You know, that's like a poll, and that's hundreds of thousands of votes. That's like a poll. You ever see these polls? We have interviewed 83 people. No, it's amazing. They're not likely to vote. You know, you're supposed to interview likely to vote. So they're not likely. They're registered. You know what a registered voter is? People that have died 14 years ago are registered. They're registered to vote. You have plenty of them in Los Angeles. You know, they had many people. They were over 100 years old. Every one of them voted for years. Then they got to be 110. They kept voting. And then people said, well, this is getting to be like record territory, you know. When you have hundreds of them voting, No, it's a lot of corrupt stuff going on, but we're getting it. We're getting it. But they want to pack the courts, pack the Supreme Court. That's a big deal. And you won't have Amy, and you won't have the great people that we've been putting on the court. You're going to have radical left judges who will become justices. You may have 15, you may have 16, you may have 18, I don't know. What they want to do is incredible. You know, they want to pick up 4 votes in the Senate, too. You know that, right? They want to add to our list of states. You know that, right? You'll have a lot of senators added. You'll have a lot of congressmen added. You have to rebuild those gorgeous rooms. You have so many seats added. All Democrats. Every one of them will be Democrat. You better get out and vote. You better get out and vote. They want to get rid of the filibuster, you know. They want to use the nuclear weapon. It's called the nuclear weapon. They want to get rid of the filibuster, and they'll be able to do whatever they want. So you got to get your president in office because we're going to protect your Second Amendment. We're going to protect all of the things that you want. But without it, you're not going to have a Second Amendment. So while I'm president, I will protect and defend the American way of life always. It's only going to get better. So we're joined today by some friends of mine. They're warriors, really. They're very incredible people. Congressman Jack Bergman. Where's Jack? Where are you, Jack? Great job, Jack. Great job. How are we doing? Are we doing okay in Michigan? Huh? You're doing okay, too. Thank you, Jack. Great job. Michigan House Speaker Lee Chatfield. Lee. Young guy, Lee. Good. Great reputation. He's doing a good job. Lee's good, right? Great reputation. Thank you very much. Congressional candidate, somebody really fantastic. I know all about Paul Young. Paul, thank you. Good job. I heard you're doing well, Paul. Michigan GOP Chair Laura Cox. Thank you, Laura. We winning, Laura? We're winning. Those are pretty interesting numbers. Did you know that before you came out? That's a little, even Laura's saying, boy, I'm doing a good job, right? And by the way, get out and vote for an outstanding guy, John James. Right? He's outstanding. John James. He is outstanding. I'll tell you, I spotted him 3 years ago, and he was doing something, and he was in this race, and there were 5 or 6 people, and I said, go back, I want to see that. And it was John James, and I said, no, that guy's great, I'll tell you what. And then I learned about him, West Point, top student, top everything, great helicopter pilot, and right? How's he doing, good? I hear he's doing better than good. And he's running against somebody that nobody ever heard of, Peters. Who the hell is Peters? Nobody ever heard of him. Now, he's made a big impact in Washington. He's a senator from Michigan, and nobody ever heard of him. I don't know. But get out for John and get out for everybody. And these people are incredible. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate it very much. Thank you. Also with us is one of your own. You know, we won the state of Michigan, and this woman was brutal. She'd call, please, one more speech, sir, one more speech. That time she called me Mr. Trump. So we the Republicans hadn't won Michigan in decades, right? And I felt we were doing good in Michigan, right? I felt we were doing good. But, you know, when you haven't won it in like 38 years or something, you know, you could feel good, but you start to realize maybe it doesn't work out. But this woman would call me, and she'd say, you have to come. And so finally, we're toward the end, and I said, Ronna, I'll do it one more time, but that's it. I got a lot of places to visit. I love Michigan, but it hasn't been won in 36 years. I said, you know, Ronna, if you don't mind, okay, I'll do it one more time. She said, that's all I want. So I did it. The following day, she called up, you have to come back one more time. So anyway, so I did, and I went to Grand Rapids, right? And we had 32,000 people, and you know what? That was at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was now election day, remember? And Crooked Hillary came, and it was unexpected. You know, say what you want about her husband, Bill. He's a pro. He said, be careful of Trump. That was the first thing. He said, you don't want to run against Trump. And I viewed that as a compliment. They all smiled. They thought it was wonderful. But he said something very interesting. He said, you better watch Michigan, because he was here. He said, I saw a Trump-Pence sign on every lawn. And he also said, you better watch Wisconsin and you better watch Minnesota. Now, Minnesota hasn't been won since 1972. He said, watch, and they all laughed at him. First of all, he's got instinct. He's a professional. Bill Clinton, whether you like him, don't like him, actually sort of, you gotta like him, right? But listen, but he said, you better be careful. And he came back and said very strongly, be careful of Michigan. And so then all of a sudden, on the night before the election, they took an unexpected trip. Barack Hussein Obama, Michelle Obama, Oprah, and Hillary. They actually forgot about Hillary. And it was unexpected, and I heard about it. And I said, oh, that means that they have a problem. Because remember, they came here the night before. 500 people showed up. We had 32,000 people show up. Because Rana, our great Rana, said, sir, you got to come. And we did. And by the time we got here, I started speaking at 1 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe it. But I left, and I said, so let me ask you a question. It's been many, many years since this. How the hell do you lose if you have 32,000 people? You know, because that's like the ultimate. She said, you don't. Yeah, that's right. That's what happened. And I'll tell you what, the enthusiasm, and not only in Michigan, but the enthusiasm all over the country is far greater. And it was great 4 years ago. It's far greater right now than it ever was. So, Rana, great job. Great job. Ted Nugent. Where's Ted Nugent? Where's Ted? Look at you. You doing well? You are a handsome devil. Thank you. Great job, Ted. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. We just won a huge victory for voting rights in Michigan. Did you hear about it? Ballot harvesting, you know, that's the old Democrat thing. Ballot harvesting is now illegal as of a short number of hours ago. And ballots must be turned in on November 3rd, also known as Election Day. Didn't they want them turned in like a couple of weeks after the election? You know, we're waiting for Michigan. Oh, well, they have a couple of weeks, so the whole country. This is just incredible. But anyway, we had a great decision, a great victory. Thank you. And some of our lawyers are here who represented us so well, right? Justin and the group, they're here. Where is it? Where is that great legal team? Because we've been having a lot of great victories. The press just doesn't like writing about it. But this was a great victory in Michigan. This election is a choice between a Trump strong, powerful, beautiful recovery and a Biden depression. You will have, because he's going to raise your taxes quadruple, you will have the single biggest depression in the history of our country, and I believe that includes 1929. That's what I believe, okay? They're going to raise your taxes, put all the regulations back on, force all these companies that moved here and all over our country from all parts of the world, they're going to all be forced to leave. You're going to have a problem like you've never had before because, and you know what they want to do with the money? Fund the Green New Deal, okay? Let's spend think of it. Their real price is $100 trillion. 100 trillion, not billion. We're now into the T's. So what would happen if you had the best year we've ever had and you had it 100 years in a row? You couldn't make enough money to pay for that. But this is what they want to do. If you vote for me, prosperity will surge. Normal life will fully resume. And that's all we want. We want normal life like 7 months ago. And next year will be one of the greatest years in the history of our country. The Democrats would terminate our recovery with a draconian, unscientific lockdown like your governor is doing right now for everybody except for her husband. That's right. She's doing it for everybody is locked down except my husband. He could go sailing anytime he wants. A guy like Biden and the Democrats want to keep Michigan locked up, locked down, and closed for business. No, it's so badly hurting your state. And then I guess they said she was threatened, right? She was threatened. And she blamed me. She blamed me. And our people were the ones that worked with her people. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. But I have to tell you something. Our FBI has to start looking at Antifa, and they have to start looking at some people that they're not looking at like they should be. Biden will shut down the country, delay the vaccine, and prolong the pandemic. And it's time. But, you know, we won another great case in Michigan, right? It was ruled unconstitutional what she was doing to you. Right? You know, we have the task force. We've done a great job. We got to everything. We filled up your cupboard, as the expression goes, especially with the ventilators and all stuff that could never have happened. And we have these calls with governors. Mike Pence heads up the task force. He did a great job. We have great professionals. And we took this thing, and we have all the governors, usually 50 governors on the line at one time. And they're always saying, sir, you've done a great job. Thank you very much. Great job, great job, great job. Your governor's down. I mean, it's all down. Thank you very much. You've done a great job. On behalf of Michigan, I'd like to thank you, ba, ba, ba. Then she goes out, speaks to the press. We're very unhappy with the president. You know, being a real estate developer was much nicer. I used to say, if you could make it in the world of New York real estate, they're the toughest people. Now I call these guys that are friends of mine. Some I can't stand, but some I like. I say, you guys are babies. Compared to what I go through with these maniacs, you're babies. No, but it's true. But she's saying, thank you very much. It's great. We have everything we need. You gave us 400 trillion goggles. You gave us this. You gave us that. You gave us more anything. We built hospitals, right? We built hospitals. We did everything. We did things nobody could do. The Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. The job they've done is incredible. And she and others, all, you know, everybody, they were all very happy. They were all, every single one. Even the real haters, they were happy. And they would say happy. But in her case, and in some others, they would then go on, and some were legit. Some were Democrat, some were against Trump, but they go out there and say, did a good job. But she would go out and say, great, very happy. I said, is there anything else you want, Governor? No, we have everything. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it on behalf of Michigan. Very good. And then she'd go out and badmouth me. I mean, it's incredible. It's so dishonest, right? It's so dishonest. But anyway, hopefully you'll be sending her packing pretty soon. By the way, and be careful of her and her attorney general because, you know, they're like in charge of the ballot stuff, right? So how the hell do I put my political and our country's political life in the hands of a pure partisan like that, right? So you got to watch it. Watch those ballots. Watch what's going on. You're more important than any eyes. And law enforcement is watching, okay? They're watching. Did you see they found 50,000 ballots in like a river? They found ballots in an ash can. They happen to have the word Trump on them, you know, they're Trump. They had another group of ballots they were printed, and they forgot 2 words. Donald Trump. They forgot to put them. Oh, that's okay. You know, they figure that's okay. They could write in his name. You know, he'll be the only one. But no, what's going on is incredible. And they know it. And, you know, then they say, they're taking away me. I'm taking away their freedom. Then they say, if you lose, will you have a friendly transition? I say, I want a fair election. Then they say, will you have we want a fair and friendly transition. I said, really? Well, when I won, you spied on my campaign. We caught you trying to overthrow the President of the United States. You're crooked as hell, and we caught you, and let's see what happens to them. But you're crooked as hell. And to me, that didn't exactly look like a friendly transition, would you say? Mr. Congressman, that was not a friendly transition, please. So anyway, we're, you know, the best way, if we could really win this decisively, it would be fabulous, just decisively. Knockout, it's a knockout punch. And you know what? We'll all get back together. Somebody said, how do you bring the country together? I said it was happening. Before the China virus came in, it's true. I was starting getting calls from people, the most unlikely people, Democrats, very radical left Democrats, And all of a sudden, you know, we had the best employment numbers we ever had. We had 160 million people working. It's called Make America Great Again. Now I say, Make America Great Again again. It's Make America Great Again again. We'll have to change those hats. But we had it, and people were calling. And I'm telling you, the country was coming together, and then we had the China virus float in. But this country was coming together because there's nothing like success. And success was bringing it together. And people ask me, can it ever get together? And some people here will be surprised when I say the answer is yes. Success is going to bring us together. And I'm telling you, we were there. We had just signed the deal with China. We had just made the USMCA, Mexico, Canada, great trade deal. Got rid of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made. But we were there, and calls were being made, and it was like, and then we got hit with the pandemic, with the rest of the world. And China kept it out of the rest of China, but they didn't keep it out of the world. So we can never forget that. But I'll tell you what keeps us, what will bring us all together is success. It's going to happen, too. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Our congressman will be having lunch soon, someday, with a radical left, maybe AOC. Do you see yourself? Maybe not. That might, he's going, I don't know about that. That might be a step too far, right? Omar. He'll be having lunch with Ilhan Omar, who truly hates our country. But she's one of the reasons we're going to win the great state of. We're going to win. We're going to win because of Ilhan, right? We're going to win Minnesota because of her. You don't see having lunch with her. He refuses. He said, I don't care how well we do. I'm not having lunch with her, right? Well, he's a warrior. He knows what he's doing. I'm delivering a safe vaccine and a rapid recovery. And you see what we've done with the vaccines and the therapeutic and the cures. Hey, I'm here. I'm here, right? No, we had great doctors. Walter Reed Medical Center, incredible doctors. Johns Hopkins. One thing when you're president, they have a lot of doctors. I'm laying in bed, I'm not feeling too great, and I'm looking up and I'm seeing doctors there. I just get, please leave me alone. And each one wanted to touch a different part of my body. And I didn't like that. I said, get the hell out of here, doctors. But we had a drug, brand new, it's Regeneron. And some others make something similar, antibodies. And all I know is I went from not feeling too great. Now, who knows? It might have been good. It might have been, you know, young people have no problem. And I made the mistake of saying in front of CNN and some of the fakers back there, I said, well, I'll have no trouble because I'm young. I'm in extraordinary shape. I'm a very great physical. And CNN said, he lied to the American public. He said he was young and that he's in perfect shape. They can't take a joke, can they? They can't take a joke. No, but they made it into a big deal. They always do, you know, that you can't do anything. I said with the illegal aliens that come in, you know, Biden said we'll give them all Medicare, we'll give them health care, we'll give them education. No, what it does is it brings them in. So I said that the Democrats want to give them health care, free college education, and everybody that comes in by a certain date, you'll get a brand new Rolls Royce. Now, I was kidding, obviously. CNN said, President Trump lied when he said they were getting a Rolls Royce. He knew they weren't going to get a Rolls Royce, but he lied. These are sick people, I'm telling you. Biden's plan will crush Michigan. My plan will make this state stronger, better in every single way than it ever was before. Joe Biden is the embodiment of the corrupt political class. You see what's happening right now. I mean, and you know what? The mainstream media doesn't want to write about it. And the giant tech companies, and they're putting themselves in danger. Section 230, they are putting themselves, because they're only existing because the government gave them something that they've never given anybody else. And they don't want it. You could find Joe Biden did the worst crime, and they will keep it out of it's the most unbelievable thing. I mean, no, it's the most unbelievable thing what's going on, and he's a criminal. He's committed crimes. For the last 47 years, Biden shipped away your jobs, shut down your factories, threw open your borders, ravaged our cities while sacrificing American blood and treasure in these ridiculous, endless foreign wars. They're all coming home, by the way. In 2016, Michigan voted to fire this corrupt and decrepit political establishment, and you elected an outsider as president to finally put America first, right? America. We've spent the last 4 years reversing the damage Joe Biden and his group inflicted upon us over the last 47 years. He was a cheerleader for NAFTA, worst trade deal ever made. TPP would have been worse than NAFTA, but I stopped it. And you know what else I stopped? The Paris Environmental Accord. And I like Prime Minister Macron a lot, but I said, how's it going over there? How's the Accord doing? They're not doing too good. Now, I saved you trillions of dollars. Nobody else would have done it. You know, when I said, oh, man, I'm breaking this Paris, I'm getting out of that thing, that was a disaster. They basically wanted to take our wealth. You can't use what's underground, and we have it and other countries don't. It was really a terrible thing. And you know, it's funny, I got out, I terminated it, got out. And the people got it. They praised it. They thought it was fantastic, except for some of those guys. They thought it was fantastic. Half of all auto manufacturing jobs in Michigan were lost after Biden backed NAFTA and the China disasters, right? World trade. That's when China became strong, the world trade, one of the great rip-offs of all time. Biden should be asking Michigan workers for your votes. I mean, he's asking you for your votes. You know what he should be asking? He should be asking for your forgiveness. You should forgive him. I would say forgive him, because even then he had no idea what the hell he was doing. He was never known as one of your smarter senators. A friend of mine said 25 years ago, yeah, let's see, our dumbest guy, I'd probably Joe. I said, who's Joe? Joe Biden. That was 25 years ago. That was prime time. This is no longer prime time. For decades, our politicians spent trillions of dollars rebuilding foreign nations, fighting foreign wars and defending foreign borders. But now we are finally protecting our nation, rebuilding our cities, and we are bringing our jobs, our factories, and our troops back home to the USA. I'll tell you, the spirit, look at the sound. I mean, it's like a great football game, right? No, really. No, the sound, you don't hear this anywhere. More so, it's more. This country, we have spirit, and that's why I'm not so surprised to hear what's happening. You know, in North Carolina, they say certain areas that are, you know, inclined with maybe our thinking, like you have to go out and work and love your life and get your kids in school and all of those things. They say the lines are 2 miles long. They've never seen anything like it. The spirit in our country is incredible. And that's happening. That's going to be happening in Pennsylvania. You watch. It's going to be happening all over the place. My first week in office, I withdrew from Obama-Biden's Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been the death to the American automobile industry. If we had signed that, and you people are affected more than anybody, and I'd always say, and Ohio's done great and others have, but I'd always say, you know, we got to put these jobs back, these auto jobs back with it, because you got 34% of your automobile business was destroyed and shipped to Mexico. And I said, how the hell did anyone let that happen? And they'd make a car and send it back into our country, sell it. So we lost all the jobs, all the taxes, all the factories. They got everything. They'd sell it. And that's it. We got nothing. We got nothing. I renegotiated the disastrous Obama-Biden trade deal with South Korea that also threatened to devastate your auto industry. And I doubled our auto exports under the deal. That was the deal. That was the Hillary Clinton deal. Remember that? She said, this deal is great. It's going to produce 250,000 jobs. And she was right. You know what? For South Korea, not for us. Didn't produce anything for us, but it gave them 250,000. So we renegotiated it. You think that was easy? Biden supported the outrageous fuel economy standard that hammered the auto industry. Just ridiculous. Over just a little quarter of a glass. They had what they had to do. I reversed that rule and helped millions of families afford a safer, better, just a better, more beautiful car. Stronger, safer, heavier. It could be a little bit heavier. Let it be a little bit heavier. It's safer. It's stronger. I ended the NAFTA nightmare and signed the brand new U.S., Mexico, Canada agreement into law. Everyone said that was going to be impossible. And it's just now kicking in, and I know it's good because the other two countries aren't so thrilled. But look, they ripped us off for years and years with that crazy NAFTA. Look at all the empty buildings you had all over, from New England to here, all over the place. What a horrible deal that was. The USMCA is expected to create a minimum of 76,000 new the auto fixers, the automobile jobs, automotive jobs. You have so many of them, and they're all coming, and many of them are coming out of here, and that includes 76,000, we think, right here. It's going to be in Michigan, and we actually think that's a low number. It could be much higher than that. It includes a lot of wage protections, too. I took the toughest ever action to stand up to China, defending Michigan workers against China's plunder and theft, and you know what I mean. If Biden wins, China will own America. He's going to own it. First of all, they pay him a fortune, so you know why wouldn't he? Works for China, basically. He works for China. How much money has China? How about Russia? So the mayor's wife of Moscow gives him 3.5, the son, Hunter, with no experience, no nothing. But they found his laptop. Can you believe this guy? They found his laptop. And they have everything. I mean, this is a disaster. They found Hunter's laptop. Where is Hunter? Where's Hunter? Hunter's not doing so well. I called him the vacuum cleaner. I changed my name. You know, I used to call him Where's Hunter. His first name was Where. Now I call him the vacuum cleaner. His father goes into a country. He's right behind him saying, give me cash. That's what happens. By the way, that's what happens. Think of it. Ukraine, he got $183,000 a month, $3 million upfront payment to advise them on energy. What do you know about energy? Well, I don't know anything about energy. Oh, that sounds like a reasonable deal. Even our congressman would take that deal, right? Anybody would take that deal. Is there anybody that wouldn't take that deal? No, we call him the human vacuum cleaner. Father goes into China. He follows him into China. Walks out with $1.5 billion to manage, which is millions of dollars a year. I call the head of the biggest Wall Street firm, probably the smartest guy on Wall Street. I say, can a thing like that happen? He says, no, it's impossible. Doesn't even happen to me, and I have the best reputation for investments. It's a disgrace. And let me tell you, it's dishonest. And when he tells that, you talk about quid pro quo. I never had a quid pro quo. How about this quid pro quo? We're not going to give you the $1 billion unless you get rid of the prosecutor. Get rid of him out of that company, which is his son. Stop investigating my son and stop investigating, or I'm not giving you the $1 billion of our money. And then he goes, boom, the prosecutor was fired. And they got the $1 billion. And the press refuses to write about it because they are actually equally corrupt. They're allowing it to happen. They are allowing it to happen. And many other things. And many, many other things. Okay, look, it's all coming up. Many other things. Fake news, CNN. CNN is so bad. They can take a great story and make it like terrible. They are truly, in my opinion, one of the most dishonest groups of people I've ever seen in my life. And by the way, you know what? And their ratings suck. Their ratings suck. Joe Biden is a corrupt politician, and the Biden family is a criminal enterprise, and I totally mean it. It's a criminal. Take a look at the brother. All of a sudden, he's a big builder in Iraq. How did that happen? Oh, how did you get to Iraq? He hasn't built anything. How did you get to Iraq to build big developments in Iraq? His brother. He makes Hillary Clinton, I call her Crooked Hillary, as you possibly have heard, look like amateur hour. I also authorized millions of, I don't think they like me too much. What do you? I also authorized millions of dollars to save Michigan's incredible, beautiful, vital, but falling apart Sulaks, and fought over. And I had to fight like hell with the Democrats to get it done. And we got $900 million for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. All done. It's all done. I don't have to say I'll do it because it's all done. And the locks were in terrible shape. You're going to lose them very quickly, and we have them. It's going to be incredible what we're doing. They said, sir, do you want to do the good job, the okay job, the passable job, a little minor renovation, or a great job? And I said, let's see, it's Michigan and a couple of other great states. Let's give them the A-plus job. And we did, okay? We gave you the A-plus job. One of the greatest dangers facing Michigan is Biden's plan to flood your state with refugees from terrorist hotspots all around the world, including Syria, Somalia, and Yemen. You know that. You know about that, right? It's in their plan. It's in the manifesto that he agreed to with Bernie Sanders. Crazy Bernie. Greatest loser on earth, Bernie Sanders. He gets beaten every time and he goes right back to work. I'll vote for this. I never saw a guy that could stand being beaten up so badly. He got hammered by the Hillary thing, but he really got hammered this last. All she had to do, Pocahontas, is leave one day earlier. He would have won every state. And he goes back and he says, let's have dinner, Pocahontas. Biden has pledged a colossal 700% increase. This is all in writing, by the way. You know, it's not. Increase in the flow of refugees. He will turn Michigan into a refugee camp. Biden has also pledged to terminate all national security travel bans. Overwhelming. You know, I got a travel ban that nobody talks about. But I said, you know, if a country thinks bad of us, if the people want to blow us up, if the people want to kill us, if the people hate us, I want a travel ban. Is that so bad to ask? And people fought me. They said, that's not nice. I won. We won. In fact, we won in the Supreme Court. We won in the Supreme Court. Now we keep people that hate us out of our country. Biden wants to give up the travel ban. He wants to knock down the wall. You know, the wall is almost complete, right? Over 400 miles. And we have the strongest southern border now we've ever had. And it's incredible what we've done on the southern border. Biden wants to knock down the wall. That's what we hear. They said, do you want to knock down the wall? I don't think he even knew what the hell they were asking him. Doesn't matter what he wants. It's what his handlers want. They want to overwhelm Michigan with poorly vetted migrants from jihadist regions. Well, Omar wants that to happen. AOC wants that to happen. Ilhan Omar, she's not happy with our country. She's not happy with our country. She wants to tell us how to run our country, right? Take a look at that. She wants Ilhan Omar. But I like her very much because, damn it, Minnesota, you better vote for me. If that plus the riots, right, where they took down Minneapolis, we saved it. We sent in the National Guard. We saved it. Well, it took them the better part of a half an hour. You know, they could have called about 2 weeks earlier, right? Would have been. And I would love to go into Portland because, first of all, Seattle, we said we're going in. And we were going in the next morning, and they all said, we're going to leave now. Thank you very much. But we're not supposed to. What we're supposed to do is they're supposed to ask us, and we want the governor of Oregon, Portland, we want the governor of Oregon to call us. We will solve that Portland problem in a period of, would you say, a half an hour or less. Wasn't that beautiful? In Minneapolis, they came in, these soldiers with the most expensive helmets in the history of mankind. You approved them. They had more computers, they have everything. They can look at somebody and somebody is gone. But they came in, bomb, bomb, bomb. You saw 1, 2, 3 black outfits. Then all of a sudden you had a second row and a third row. And they had their tear gas and they had their pepper spray, which the other side doesn't want to use because it's not nice. You know, they can throw cans at you and they can throw rocks and stones and hurt your police, but you're not allowed to guard yourself with tear gas, pepper spray, which 100% are effective. So they just marched forward and the whole thing was over. It was like, it was over, right? I don't know. There's something about that when you watch everybody getting pushed around. There's something very beautiful about it. I don't care what anyone says. Not politically correct. I'll be on. They'll say, he thinks that was beautiful. But you people get it. You get it probably better than I do even, right? When you get right down. But what they're doing will not only undermine your security, but it will overcrowd your hospitals and divert needed resources for low-income communities that we're all for. We want to help people. We want to help our citizens. Under my leadership, we achieved the most secure border in U.S. history, and when the wall is finished, which will be very soon, we are going to have a great, big, beautiful celebration. And with that wall, by the way, you know, we're keeping out terrorists, extremists, violent criminals, rapists, murderers, and we also, I have to say, our Border Patrol and ICE have done an incredible job. You know, ICE has removed thousands of MS-13 out of our country. And not a lot of people want that job. That's a tough job. You got to be a certain type of person. You don't want it with this handsome guy with the sunglasses. You don't want it. He doesn't want to be a member of ICE. They go into what they call a nest, and the fists are flying and everything, and then they walk out, and that's the end of that. No, these guys are tough and smart, and you know what? They love our country, and we love them too. We invested $2.5 trillion in the United States military. We have the greatest equipment any nation has ever had. When I came, a highly overrated general told me, sir, we have no ammunition. We maybe had to do something. We have no ammunition, sir. I said, no president should ever hear that again. Anyway, we spent $2.5 trillion, and we have the greatest equipment, missiles, rockets, tanks, planes, fighter jets, ships, tankers, bombers. We have the greatest equipment. We have, I call it the super-duper missiles that go very fast, hypersonic, right? Super dupers. They go 5 to 7 times faster than the fastest missile in the world. They go so fast you can't do anything. I mean, it's like, and by the way, our nuclear is rebuilt, replenished, and here's what you have to do. We had no choice. It was not in good shape. Hope to God we never have to use any of this equipment, okay? And the best way you don't have to use it is if you have it, okay? That's it. But we have the best ever that we've ever had. We launched, all made in the USA, by the way, every ounce of it. And we launched the first new branch of the U.S. Armed Forces in 75 years, United States Armed Forces. 75 years, think of it, the Space Force. Right? Which people really, I mean, look, you know, a couple of them made the statement, whether you like them or not, I made promises during the campaign. But some of them say, I actually produced more than the promises I made, as opposed, most politicians never keep their promises. But think of it, Space Force, I never talked about Space Force. I realized after being here for a year and a half, I said, you know, Russia's doing big stuff out in space, China's doing big stuff. I said, we got to have a Space Force. They were not happy when this happened. But we got it through Congress, thanks to your congressmen and various other people, right? We did a good job. Thank you, man. We did a good job, and we have Space Force, and it's going to end up being one of our most important, without question. I withdrew from the last administration's disastrous Iran nuclear deal. $150 billion for nothing. Here's $150 billion. $1.8 billion in cash. I'm even more impressed with that. Think of it. Cash. $1.8 billion they got. And you know, we got nothing. We got nothing. In fact, that agreement's almost going to expire if we didn't terminate it, which we did. I kept my promise, recognized the true capital of Israel, and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. 52 years they were working for. 52 years. They'd come in every year. They'd fly in with those beautiful jets, and everybody would come in. And they'd have lunch, and they'd talk 2-3 days. Then they'd leave. 52 years that went on. I did it in about 2 hours. Golan Heights. And instead of endless war, we are forging peace in the Middle East. No blood on the sand. No blood. No blood. I did more in 47 months than Sleepy Joe Biden did in 47 years, which is true. Now the Democrats are pushing the most far-left agenda ever put forward by a presidential nominee. The Biden plan would destroy Social Security and destroy protections for pre-existing conditions. His running mate co-sponsors a socialist health care plan to ban private insurance. A lot of you have private insurance. We have 180 million people, and they love their private insurance, and they want it. They don't want to go into a hospital ward when they have a cold. They want to have their private insurance, and they want their doctor, and they want their plan. And Obama said that you can have your doctor and you can have your plan. And he said it 28 times, and he lied. Biden also supports abolishing school choice in charter schools. It's not going to happen. In a second term, I will provide school choice to every parent in America. A vote for Republicans is a vote for safe communities, great jobs, and a limitless future for all Americans. It's a vote for the American dream. That's what we're doing. And in conclusion, over the next 4 years, we will make America into the manufacturing superpower of the world, and we will end our reliance on China once and for all. We will hire more police, and thank you to law enforcement for being here. You're all over. We love our police. Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot of law enforcement here. I said to Biden during the debate, I said, name one law enforcement group that supported you, and Chris Wallace bailed them out. Then I said, say the words law and order, just law and order, nothing fancy, law and order. We just want law and order. Everybody wants that. And he said he didn't want to get involved. And then Chris Wallace bailed him out again. I said, no, you can't do that, because I was really debating two people. No, I was really debating one, Chris Wallace. But I said, name it. Then I think he said, didn't he say something like, law, order, and safety and security and all this, He wanted to soften it up because the radical left will throw him overboard with that. No, I said, say law and order, but he couldn't do it, but he got bailed out. But he's going to increase penalties for assaults. If you take a look at what's going on with assaults, we are going to take care of our police, and when they do bad things to our police, the people that do it are going to suffer the consequences. Okay? I think I have every police group in the nation. In fact, they had down as part of the script, I was supposed to read them. I said, I can't read that long. I would have been reading here all day long. But we literally have every police group in the nation. We even got the endorsement of New York City Police. They've never done it before. We got the endorsement of Chicago Police. And, that's tough because they never did it. We've got every law enforcement. We've got Florida, Texas. We've got everybody. They're all with us. So we do have New York. That's right. But I just want to thank them because they're incredible, and they take a lot of abuse, and they don't realize that the people of our country love them. Just realize it. And we will ban deadly sanctuary cities. Get them out of here. Nobody wants them. The only ones want them are the politicians. The people in California don't want them. The politicians want them. We will uphold religious liberty, free speech, and the right to keep and bear arms. Second Amendment. We will strike down terrorists who threaten our citizens, and we will keep America out of endless, ridiculous foreign wars of places you've never even heard of. We will maintain America's unrivaled military might, and we will ensure peace through strength. We will end surprise medical billing. That surprise medical billing is a bad deal, and it's now ending. Require price transparency, all signed up. Goes into effect January 1st. Can you imagine if this sleepy guy gets in, and it's January 1st, and everybody says, this price transparency, I'll tell you what, it's bigger than healthcare. Wait till you see. It's bigger than healthcare. You talk about pricing, bigger. And can you imagine? And he'll get credit for it. They'll say, Biden did a phenomenal job on price. People have been trying to get this thing for 25 years. I got it done January. I said to my people, couldn't you do it like from 6-7 months ago? But they had statutory limits. You had to wait here, there, that. So on January 1st, I better damn well be president, I'll tell you. Well, I will be. I will be. Yeah, I will be for 20 days. Don't do this to me. Don't do that. You can't do that. No. So January 1st, it goes into effect. We go out to January 20th. But you know what? I honestly believe, I don't think we're going to have to worry about it. I think we're going to have price transparency. We'll be here for 4 years. And then if we decide to go for an extra 4 or 8 or something.